Chapter 507. Magic? As a powerful giant dragon, you actually chose to use magic as a weapon in battle instead of your sharp teeth and claws? Tampa's eyes were filled with unconcealed surprise. Evidently, he did not mind losing an arm. Instead, he was interested in Zhang Cheng's strange battle style. After all, giant dragons had always been the symbol of power in the Faerun continent. Even dragon wizards and warlocks with high spellcasting levels would not easily give up their advantage in size. Once they found an opportunity, they would definitely pounce and bite their opponent or spit out a fatal dragon's breath. What's the difference? Claws and teeth are weapons. Magic is also a weapon. Also, don't tell me you're so naive to think that I'd choose to fight the most experienced god in the world? I'm sorry, I'm not that stupid. Zhang Qing let go of the chipped black greatsword with a faint smile and took a few steps back to maintain a safe distance. As the saying went, it was important to know one's own limit. He was not the kind of idiot who would get carried away and think that he was invincible after gaining some power. He was very clear about his own weakness, which was close combat. Although his giant dragon body made up for this weakness to a certain extent and even gave his opponent great pressure, it also depended on who his opponent was. Take Tampa, the god of war before him, as an example. Not only would he not be able to gain an advantage in close combat, he might even be at a disadvantage. After all, his close combat ability was second to none among the gods. Coupled with the terrifying black greatsword in his hand, only a fool would easily approach him. Ha 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 ha. You're very smart. And you don't have the same arrogance as your kind. Alright, looks like we won't be able to have a good fight. Tampa laughed and shrugged his shoulders. At the same time, he injected his divine power into his weapon. In the blink of an eye, the greatsword in his hand was enveloped in a layer of blood-red mist. Bloodshed domain. Zhang Qing was no longer a noob who knew nothing about divine power. He quickly recognized that Tampa was using the power exclusive to the god of war. That's right. Don't think of using these boring tricks from now on. With that, Tampa raised his greatsword high and slashed forward. The next second, boom! Accompanied by a deafening boom, the entire ground cracked under this attack. A 40-meter-long and 2-meter-deep ravine was formed, fully displaying the terrifying destructive power of a deity. As for Zhang Qing, who had been hit head-on, the armor plate on his right wing had been completely shattered. Although it was slowly repairing itself with the help of the runes, it would take a while for it to fully recover. At the same time, many of the scales under the armor plate were severely shattered, revealing the bloody muscles and bones underneath. Interesting, so divine power can be used like this. Zhang Qing's eyes lit up slightly. He forced the second heart in his body to beat faster. In less than a few seconds, the hideous wound was completely healed. There was no doubt that compared to these veteran gods, his level of use of divine power and divinity was as poor as a kindergartner's. Enhanced regeneration? Tempest's pupils constricted when he saw this. If it had been in the past, he would not have cared about the issue of regeneration. This was because many gods' avatars had very powerful self-healing abilities. But now, all the gods were imprisoned in the bodies of mortals. Not to mention regeneration, even a deep cut would lead to death from excessive blood loss if it wasn't treated as soon as possible. You seem very surprised. I've said before that in a one-on-one duel, no god is my match. Unless you can directly smash my head, even if my heart is pierced or my head is chopped off, I can quickly recover. As Zhang Qing spoke, he tried to inject divine power into the armor plate. Instantly, the severely damaged parts seemed to come alive. To be precise, all the armor plates on the surface of his body seemed to come alive, completely turning into flowing metal liquid. They could also continuously change their appearance according to his will. In order to confirm the power of this thing, he suddenly swung his thick tail without warning. Bang! With a muffled sound, the war god, who had tried to block with his greatsword, was sent flying horizontally. He crashed into 2 trees and fell to the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood. It turned out that in the instant of the attack, most of the metal liquid had gathered at his tail, solidifying into a spiked flail the size of a basketball. Unable to react in time, Tempest was sent flying by the terrifying inertia. One of the spikes even pierced through his right lung. Aha! Looks like it's quite powerful. Thank you for teaching me another move. Zhang Qing had no intention of holding back at all. He kept trying all sorts of new tricks. The armor plate, which was originally just a defensive tool, turned into a meteor hammer, then a spear, and then a rain of arrows under his control. In less than 10 minutes, Tampa was already on the brink of death. No matter how rich his combat experience was, it could not change the most tragic aspect of the warrior. Encountering an opponent that he could not counter meant that he could not win the final victory. Several times, he tried to throw the weapon imbued with divine power in his hand, but unfortunately, after suffering a loss once, Zhang Qing was constantly on the move, not giving the war god a second chance to attack. Just like that, under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, Tempest finally fell to the ground due to excessive blood loss, turning into an ice-cold corpse. There was neither a blood-boiling battle as expected, nor a dragon-slaying performance that adventurers often talked about. All that was left was a child's play of torture. And the victim was none other than the god of war, Tempest, who was revered and admired by countless warriors. Lightly picking up the war god's battered corpse, Zhang Qing sneered and mocked. Look, this is the war god worshipped by mortals. After losing his power, he is no better than a mortal. The gods are not as powerful and omnipotent as you imagine. Soon, I will prove this point once again. Evil black dragon, put down Tempest's corpse. You are blaspheming the gods. The god of justice, Tyre, finally could not hold back and was the first to step forward. Blaspheming the gods? No, I am just stating a fact. Have you not noticed? Why did the god of gods, His Majesty Io, strike you down to the mortal realm and walk the material world with the bodies of mortals? This is a form of punishment, but also a form of training. But you do not realize this at all, and continue to fight among yourselves. I think that perhaps it would be better to create a world without gods. As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Qing did not hesitate to crush the teleportation gem in his hand. In an instant. Chapter 508. That's Cherise. She made Cherise's corpse into an undead puppet. The goddess of love, Shuna, recognized her good friend at a glance, and her beautiful eyes shot out flames of anger. How many years had it been? How many years had it been since a mortal dared to challenge the dignity of a god? Not to mention killing a god and making her corpse into an undead puppet. Even the demons of the abyss, who were known to be the most hostile to gods, did not dare to do so easily. Ha 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 ha. What, are you angry? Why, just because you made use of a god's corpse a little, you think you've been offended? Then why do you think you have the right to order your believers to kill mortals without restraint and forcefully awaken them from their long slumber? Do you have special privileges just because you're gods? Foolish gods! Today is the day you die. I declare that the twilight of the gods has officially begun. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Qing pounced on the god of mages. If there were any gods present who could make him feel fear from the bottom of his heart, Azuz would definitely be at the top of the list. Of course, if the goddess of magic was not dead, then the first target of attack would be her. The 6 demigod mummies with different rune weapons received the order almost at the same time and joined the ranks of the siege, even ignoring the attacks of the other gods behind them. Damn it! Azuz did not expect to be the first target of attack at all, and hurriedly activated all the trigger protection spells in one breath. He could not understand at all. He had not said a word from beginning to end, nor did he show any hostility, so why would he be attacked so crazily? Sorry. Although I'd like to find some time to sit down with you over a pot of tea and talk about magic in private, It seems like that's impossible now. Because you're too much of a threat, I can't let you sneak attack me from behind. After saying that, Zhang Qing quickly activated a scroll that emitted rich magical energy. In an instant, pop, 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 the protection spells on the god of mages were dispelled one after another, and a large number of magic items began to shatter one by one for some reason. Only a few divine artifacts and legendary magic items were spared. There was no doubt that this was not an ordinary anti-magic spell, but the famous Mordenkainen's Great Disjunction. It was said that Mordenkainen, the leader of Eightleaf, the most powerful group of spellcasters in the Grey Eagle world, was not very rich when he was young. He was often bullied by the rich sorcerers who were full of magic items, scrolls, rings, and potions. So, he held a grudge and finally invented this crazy ninth circle spell. Of course, these were just rumors, and no one knew if it was true. However, any unlucky person who was hit by Mage's Disjunction would not only have 99% of their protection and buff spells dispelled, but all their magic items, scrolls, and potions had a very high chance of being directly destroyed. It was said that even divine artifacts were no exception. However, the higher the level of enchantment, the more complex and stable the magic structure was, and the greater the chance of resisting Mage's Disjunction. But it was undeniable that this was the spell that countless rich people hated the most. Can you imagine the feeling when a player with luxurious equipment is suddenly hit by Mage's Disjunction, and all the priceless luxurious equipment is turned into a pile of garbage? After tasting it once, one would never want to taste it a second time. No! You won't succeed. Azuth was not a fool. He quickly realized what it meant to lose his protection, so he hurriedly added another layer of divine shield to himself. He believed that this layer of divine shield alone could buy him enough time to recite spells and release spells. But unfortunately, he obviously neglected a weapon used by mortals to kill gods. The half-mummy waved an inconspicuous dagger, which easily passed through the divine shield, and stabbed the dagger full of resentment into the heart of the god of mages. Puff! Dazzling golden blood splattered everywhere. Azutha's eyes widened. Even at the last moment of his death, he could not believe that his divine shield could not resist a crude iron weapon. Zashman's dagger. It's Zashman's dagger. Serene, the goddess of the moon, was indeed one of the oldest gods in the world. She immediately called out the name of the weapon that killed the god of mages. Shouldn't this thing be in Ban's hands? Tyre, the god of justice, suddenly looked terrible. It could not be helped. Perhaps before the beginning of the time of troubles, when the gods descended to the mortal world with their avatars, this dagger could only cause limited damage at most. But now they were all mortals. If the divine shield could not protect them, then it would only take one blow to kill them. Looking at the strong fear in the eyes of the gods, Zhang Qing calmly controlled the brain cells in his skull that had merged with the main brain of the Mind Flayer to form a few white tentacles. He directly inserted them into Azutha's brain from the eyes and other parts of his brain and devoured the rich knowledge in his memory area. After doing all this, he took a deep breath with great satisfaction and asked the other gods with a grim smile, "Who's next?" "My dear friend, I think we must pay a considerable sacrifice to defeat this evil and terrible enemy," Tyre said to his staunchest ally, the god of suffering, with a dignified expression. "I understand. Since that's the case, let me be the first sacrifice." Ermit had a gentle smile on his face, as if pain and death were nothing in his eyes. This was because the image of this deity was that of an old man covered in wounds and scars. His feet were even lame, and his short and thin body was only covered by a piece of tattered loincloth. It was so miserable that it was unbearable to look at. As the oldest and most determined of the three gods of justice, the god of suffering rarely showed his power. Most of his believers were idealists who silently gave without asking for anything in return. They were only thinking about saving the suffering people of the world, especially protecting children from abuse and torture. But very few people knew that it was such a benevolent and kind God. Once he was angry, even the god of tyranny, Ban, and the god of storms, Taros, had to retreat. This was because the pain and torture that he endured on behalf of the people would transform into an extremely powerful divine power when he was furious, instantly destroying everything around him. Zhang Qing suddenly had a bad premonition as he stared at Ermita slowly walking towards him. He opened his mouth abruptly and spat out a hot breath. But what happened next made his scalp tingle. The god of suffering had no intention of dodging or using his divine power to resist. He allowed the hot flames to burn his skin, muscles, and bones. Even after losing his legs and hands, he still moved forward with difficulty. Chapter 509. Evil Black Dragon, have you ever felt pain? Ermat dragged his broken body and raised his head to ask. Pain. Zhang Qing narrowed his eyes and looked at him vigilantly. He could feel that there was a terrifying power growing in the body of this almost crippled god. However, the god of suffering did not care and nodded. Yes. Do you know how many people in the world are suffering and torment every day? Do you know how strong a will is needed to ensure that one's mind does not break down by transferring these sufferings to oneself? What do you mean? It's simple. Next, you will bear the suffering of the entire world. As the last word left his mouth, a surge of divine power burst out of Ermita's body. Zhang Qing could not react in time and was enveloped on the spot. In just a few seconds, he fell to the ground and screamed in pain. Ah! Damn it! What did you do to me? Although there was not a single wound on his body, his nerves sent an indescribable pain signal to the center of his brain. It felt like he was being cut into pieces. Every inch of his bones had been broken and his muscles were twitching uncontrollably. It's nothing. I just transferred the sufferings that I've been enduring to you. Ermat used his leg that was almost burned to ashes to support his body and slowly stood up. Although it looked like he could be blown away by a gust of wind at any time, no one doubted his inner strength. Humph! You think this little pain can defeat me? Zhang Qing quickly used the power of his mind to cut off his brain's perception of pain. He was not a psychopathic lunatic like the god of suffering, and he did not intend to use terrible pain to train his will. Ermat smiled faintly and shook his head. No, I just want you to understand that the meaning of God is not as shallow as you think. I admit that there are some gods who are a bit outrageous. Not only do they forget their duties, they even try to rule over life. However, there are more gods who still diligently perform their duties. Can you imagine what the world would be like without all the gods? I guarantee that it would only become more chaotic, not more beautiful. You want to persuade me? Zhang Qing slightly raised the corner of his mouth and showed a playful expression. No, I just want you to understand that you are wrong before you die. All right, it's time to completely bind you and end this calamity. As soon as he finished speaking, Ermat suddenly opened his arms as if he wanted to hug something. Then his body began to gradually turn into endless light and completely enveloped the huge dragon's body. Seeing this scene, the god of justice Tyre could not help but shed a few drops of tears. He suddenly pulled out his sword and shouted, Our friend, the respected god of suffering, has given his life. Now that the enemy is unable to move or use any spells, let us kill this blasphemous dragon together. Out of the way. I want revenge for Sharius. The goddess of love Shuna, who was known as the fire-haired lady, was the first to rush out. She used a spear completely condensed from divine power to instantly pierce through the black dragon's huge body. Puff! Dazzling blood suddenly splattered everywhere. No one knew what kind of power Ermat used. Anyway, no matter how Zhang Qing struggled and twisted the surrounding magic energy, he could not move at all. Not to mention moving, he could not even blink his eyes. He could only watch as the gods wantonly squandered their divine power and launched fatal attacks on him. In less than a few minutes, many places revealed large amounts of bloody flesh, organs, and even bones. There was no doubt that if this continued, even with his powerful regenerative ability, it wouldn't be long before he died. The 6 demigod mummies were also purified by Tyr's terrifying positive energy, turning into a pile of useless bandages and dust. Death. He had never been so close to Zhang Qing. Just as he was about to abandon this body and escape, the owner of the parchment finally could not hold back and released a dazzling golden light. Instantly, the light screen that was firmly trapping him suddenly disappeared. Then, a terrifying crack that was dozens of meters long appeared out of thin air and sucked the huge black dragon's body in. Darkness. Endless darkness. There was no light, no sound, no smell, and no sense of touch. Zhang Qing felt as if he was in an endless void. Nothing existed around him. He could not even be sure if he was still alive. Fortunately, this state that was 10,000 times more terrifying than death only lasted for a very short time. A ray of light dispelled all the darkness. In less than a minute, a piece of land slowly formed under his feet. His surroundings were no longer filled with endless darkness. Instead, mirage-like illusions appeared one after another. However, these illusions looked somewhat familiar. They were the countless magical worlds he had seen in front of the Void Tower. Before Zhang Qing could react to what was going on, an extremely beautiful woman walked out of the dazzling light. She was completely naked at the foot of the mountain, showing off her perfect body to her heart's content. However, for some reason, not only did she not give off a frivolous or lustful feeling, but she made people feel close to her from the bottom of their hearts. That feeling was like a child to his mother. Hee, haven't you always wanted to see me? Now that I've shown myself, why aren't you saying anything? The woman stretched out her hand and gently stroked the wounds on the dragon's body that had not yet healed, teasing him with a smile. Every wound that she touched healed completely in 2 or 3 seconds, not leaving a single scar. Powerful, mysterious, beautiful, elegant, and that inexplicable sense of intimacy. Zhang Qing did not know how to describe his feelings at the moment. After a few minutes, he carefully opened his mouth and probed. "You're the owner of the parchment?" "That's right, my child. I know you must have a lot of questions. Don't worry, I have plenty of time to slowly answer them for you. To be honest, I really did not expect that you would bet your life to see me." As the woman spoke, she waved her hands and created the earth, flowers, trees, rivers, mountains, and even all kinds of animals out of thin air. Chapter 510. Who are you? Zhang Qing could not help but ask his first question as he felt the rapid changes in his surroundings. He had no choice. He was simply too curious. One had to know that ever since she appeared, her abilities were far beyond the comprehension of mortals. Even many gods in myths and legends could not do this, at least not the gods of the Faerun continent. At most, they could use their divine powers to modify the environment to a certain extent, but they could never create something out of nothing. I have many names. The ancient Egyptians called me the Lord of the Universe, and the ancient Greeks called me the Chaos Cows. Generally speaking, I am the first consciousness born on the magical earth that you are on now. I even predate the birth of the first life on that planet by hundreds of millions of years. The woman leaned against a towering tree and teased the small animals around her as she answered calmly. "You mean you are the creator?" Zhang Qing frowned subconsciously. As someone who knew about the origins of myths and legends all over the world, he knew very well that regardless of whether it was the East, the West, America, or Africa, one could find the origin of all myths and legend. That was the God of gods who created the god. However, for some reason, after this God of gods completed his work, he quickly disappeared as if he had never appeared. He or she did not need the faith and worship of humans, nor did they care about the gods' attitude towards them. It was as if they were doing it for fun and hobby. The woman seemed to have noticed something. She put down the little rabbit in her arms and looked up with a smile. Why, you don't believe me? No, I just don't understand. Zhang Qing quickly shook his head. Since you are the creator, you should have supreme authority like the god of gods of the Faerun continent, Io. Even if you don't care if people believe in you, you shouldn't be completely unknown like you are now. Ha 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 ha. You are indeed very smart. Very sharp. Yes, there was an accident later. The children that I created collectively rebelled and stripped my consciousness from my body and power, banishing me to the endless void. The place you are standing on now is the gap between the worlds and the universe. At the same time, it is also the cage that imprisoned my consciousness. At this point, the woman's eyes were filled with undisguised anger and hatred. The surrounding environment also began to change drastically due to her emotions. In an instant, violent storms, lightning flashes, and volcanic eruptions were all happening within a radius of tens of kilometers. So now you have lost most of your power, and you can't even return to your own world? Zhang Qing finally grasped the main point, and a subtle playfulness appeared on his face. The woman nodded without hesitation. That's right. My body was cut into 11 pieces by those traitors and sealed in different corners of the world. Each of them is guarded by powerful guards. Then, the parchment scrolls were also created by you in order to recruit people to break these seals. Yes. To be more precise, the 14 children, including you, are all special individuals that I personally infused with power to give birth to. These powers are like seeds. Most of the time, they are dormant in the body and have not taken root. Other than you, until now, only a child called Valenti has successfully activated the seed. Similarly, it was he who helped me break the first seal. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do all this. What happened after that? Zhang Qing suddenly realized that this senior called Valenti was very likely the creator and first owner of the demon sword, the soul catcher. His eyes were filled with intense curiosity. He died. He perished together with the guard who was guarding the first seal. A string of crystal-clear tears flowed down the woman's cheeks. In other words, my final mission is to break the remaining 10 seals? Obviously, this answer was not out of Zhang Qing's expectations. After all, the demon sword had hinted long ago that its previous owners did not have good endings. They either died from various accidents or had their minds broken and their souls devoured by the sword. Gently wiping away her tears, the woman quickly calmed herself down and warned very seriously, "It's not as simple as you think. First of all, these seals are hidden in remote places. If you want to find them, you have to dig deep into the information left behind from the ancient mythological era. Most importantly, you have to have the corresponding key. Otherwise, you won't even be able to enter the entrance. Secondly, every seal has an incomparably powerful guardian. It might be a terrifying monster in the myths that could kill the gods, or it might be a terrifying giant that was jointly created by a certain god. In short, it's dozens or even hundreds of times stronger than the gods you just encountered. Last but not least, there was one more important point. The gods who sealed me knew very well that one day I would return to take revenge on them, so they chose to hibernate a long time ago to preserve their power. Once more than 4 seals are broken, some of them will wake up. When that happens, you will face the real gods. Remember, they are not the saints you killed in the Faerun continent, nor are they the so-called incarnations. They are comparable to the Titans in the pantheon of Azeroth. Titans? Are you sure that's not an exaggeration? Zhang Qing's face suddenly became ugly. What were the Titans in the universe of Azeroth? To put it nicely, they were the creators, the defenders of the universe's order, a group of idealists who had nothing better to do. But to put it bluntly, they were King humanoid planet destroyers. The Titan Sargeras, who had fallen into darkness, could destroy a planet with a full blow. He could not accept that the Earth he came from was actually such a dangerous place. Of course not. I'm not like Io, the god of gods, who constantly suppresses and limits the power of his children. On the contrary, I'm a loving mother. I do my best to make every child stronger and more perfect. Besides, to a certain extent, you are also my child. Although I didn't give birth to you personally, I gave you the same potential as other children. Chapter 5:11. In the crevice between worlds, time was meaningless. To be exact, there was no concept of time and space here at all. It was just a void. Even the earth, flowers, plants, trees, and animals that were created needed some kind of power from this woman who claimed to be the creator to maintain them. Otherwise, they would soon begin to collapse and dissipate. Taking advantage of the fact that this tiny world had not completely collapsed for the time being, Zhang Qing kept asking all kinds of questions. He even deliberately asked some sensitive questions 3 to 5 times until he was sure that there was not the slightest discrepancy in the answers. As a very suspicious person, he obviously did not completely believe the other party's words. At least, he was not stupid enough to believe that as long as he unlocked 10 seals, he would be able to obtain supreme authority. The woman who claimed to be the creator obviously understood this, but she was not unhappy at all. No matter how many times the same question was asked, she would patiently give the answer with a smile on her face. She even explained some of the secrets of traveling between worlds. It was easy to say. The crevice between worlds was actually not completely isolated from the rest of the world. Every once in a while, there would be a world crevice that would connect with it for a short period of time. Of course, this small crevice was far from enough to allow a powerful individual like the creator to enter and exit, even if she was just a consciousness without a physical body. And the parchment scroll was essentially equivalent to a positioning coordinate. Once the crevice was connected, she could use the power that she had accumulated on a daily basis to transmit the bearer of the parchment scroll to the corresponding world, and then use some loopholes to allow her children to quickly gain power. It had to be said that this was very dangerous. The previous bearers of the parchment scroll had died in those dangerous worlds. In addition, Zhang Qing also learned that heaven and hell were actually not like what was recorded in the parliament, where the location of the magical earth was accidentally discovered. On the contrary, they were lured by the creator in front of him and attacked the prehistoric civilization established by the gods of the mythological era. Many gods died in that fierce war, but a small number of gods discovered the conspiracy of their exiled mother, and decisively chose to disappear without a trace, finding a secluded place to fall into a deep sleep to ensure that when the next war came, they would have enough strength to fight back. In general, everything that happened on the magical earth was basically a family drama. The powerful creator mother diligently transformed the world and created her most beloved children, gods, allowing them to assist her in her next task. Unfortunately, some of these children were too powerful. During their rebellious period, for some unknown reason, they joined forces to attack their mother and seal her away. Now, this angry mother was using the parchment scroll to choose targets in various worlds to bestow power seeds upon. She was trying to break the seal and return to her original world, completely killing all the traitorous children who had betrayed her. The earth where Zhang Qing lived had been connected to the crack by chance, coincidentally coinciding with the death of the previous owner of the parchment scroll. In the end, he was injected with a seed of power when he was still in the fetal state. It was only until the second connection that he was forcefully pulled in, and it had nothing to do with that night of drunkenness. The dozens of square kilometers of land created out of thin air did not last long before it completely disappeared without a trace. Everything returned to the state when Zhang Qing had just entered. Darkness. Void. He couldn't see, hear, or feel anything. If it were an ordinary person who stayed in such a situation, they would have a mental breakdown at most for dozens of minutes to more than 10 hours. They would either directly commit suicide or go crazy. However, not only did he not collapse, but he also subconsciously began to talk and debate with his subpersonality. Through self-affirmation again and again, his control was greatly enhanced. Just like that, He did not know how much time had passed, nor did he know how many debates had taken place in his mind. In any case, when Zhang Qing finally began to feel bored, lonely, a familiar voice suddenly echoed in his ears. "I just found a crack to a new world. Do you want to go for a vacation?" "What kind of world?" "Well, it's a world that looks very similar to Earth on the surface, but it's very interesting and dangerous. But don't worry too much. You only need to stay there for about a year and a half. When my power recovers a little, I can send you back." "Well, since the location is Earth, the danger factor should not be that high. Send me there." Zhang Qing really could not bear to be trapped in this dark cage for a long time, so he agreed without hesitation. With the body of a divine dragon, as well as countless profound magical knowledge and powerful mental abilities, he might not necessarily die even if the end of the world came. I wish you a happy vacation, my child." Accompanied by a kind and pleasant laughter, Zhang Qing only felt his vision go black, and then a powerful force stuffed him into the crack. The next second, ah! God! This is a dragon! A dragon! Damn it! Why would such a monster appear in the airport? Run! Run! Mother! Mother! Where are you? For a moment, all kinds of screams were incessant. When his golden eyes recovered their vision, he finally found that he had appeared in a train station, and what was more frightening was that it was still daytime. Chaos. Unparalleled chaos. Almost everyone was trying their best to escape from the spacious hall. Of course, these ordinary people had plenty of reasons to escape because Zhang Qing wasn't in his human form right now. Instead, he was a giant dragon that was more than 100 meters long, including his tail. The surface of his body was covered in flowing liquid magical metal, which added a sense of menace to his appearance. Not to mention the ordinary people, even the policemen who ran over from not far away were so frightened that they stood rooted to the ground. They did not even have the courage to take out their guns. Even though he didn't release a single spell, just the natural aura of a giant dragon was enough to make the situation go completely out of control. It was foreseeable that, if nothing unexpected happened, in about half an hour, all the news media in the world would desperately report about a monster from the mythological era. Oh, damn it! Let's hope the situation doesn't develop into the worst situation. The corner of Zhang Cheng's mouth twitched slightly, and his face was full of helplessness. After all, he was here to relax for a vacation, not to play hide-and-seek with the government and the military. Chapter 512. Sob, sob, sob. Mom, where are you? A little girl of about 5 or 6 years old wearing a pink princess dress could no longer hold back her tears. She had no choice but to cry. She was standing right in front of Zhang Qing. As long as the giant dragon's claws moved forward a little, this cute little loli would instantly die. Quiet! Zhang Qing really hated hearing children cry. He bent down and stared at them with his golden eyes, using standard American English to scold them. Ever since he had passed through the gap, he had not attacked a single person. At most, a few unlucky people had been trampled and suffered minor injuries while running away. But for some reason, the scene looked as if he had committed some heinous crime. Perhaps she was frightened, but when the little girl saw the black dragon's huge head and the sharp fangs in its mouth, she immediately stopped crying. She hugged the teddy bear in her arms tightly, her whole body trembling. After a full minute, she gathered her courage and asked, Mr. Evil Dragon, will you eat me?" "No, I won't. Why would you have such a ridiculous idea? There is no such creature as a human in my diet." Zhang Qing impatiently waved his claws, secretly paying attention to the movements outside. Because in just a few minutes, he had already felt the rich magical energy that filled this world. Without a doubt, this Earth was not an ordinary Earth, but a world filled with supernatural powers. It was just that he was not sure if it was a game or movie in his memory, or a completely foreign and independent place. Really? You really won't eat me? The little girl seemed to have noticed that the huge creature in front of her did not have any hostility towards her, and her courage gradually grew. Yes, I guarantee. Before Zhang Qing could finish his words, an extremely fast figure suddenly rushed out from an old van. It was so fast that it was almost impossible to see with the naked eye as it sprinted towards the little Loli's location. Obviously, this fellow wanted to save the girl from the monster's eyes. Under normal circumstances, normal people would not be able to react in time. However, Zhang Qing was clearly not an ordinary person. To be exact, he was not even human. Relying on the superhuman physique and reaction speed brought about by his divinity, he easily raised his claw and pressed it firmly to the ground the moment the other party was about to touch the girl. Ah! The immense power caused the reckless black man to howl in pain. However, for some reason, his broken arm recovered in a matter of seconds. His recovery speed was comparable to that of the great demons of the Faerun continent. What is this? Zhang Qing seemed to have found something interesting. He gently tore open the other party's sleeve and found a centipede-shaped device filled with an unknown liquid. Combined with the familiar black face of the other party, he instantly connected it to a certain movie in his memory. But before he could figure out what to do, a few black SUVs sped over. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen heavily armed soldiers were removed from the vehicles. Two of them were even carrying thick tubes, which were obviously rocket launchers. Fortunately, these people were not in a hurry to launch an attack. They just entered the corresponding positions and surrounded the entire station from top to bottom. About half a minute later, a middle-aged white man in a black suit with a forced smile on his face carefully walked in from the entrance. He raised his hands to indicate that he was unarmed as he slowly approached. At the same time, he spoke in an unhurried tone. "Hello, respected Mr. Dragon, my name is Phil Coulson. I belong to the Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Security Bureau. I know you can understand our language. Please release the girl immediately and the wounded at your feet. We can sit down and talk." "Of course. No problem." Zhang Qing did not hesitate to take 2 steps back. The corner of his mouth curled up into a meaningful smile. Obviously, this was no other place. It was the famous Marvel Universe, and it was the beginning of the story of SHIELD agents. That's it? No additional conditions? Coulson was obviously stunned. He never dreamed that a huge dragon that looked ferocious, terrifying, and full of deterrence would be so easy to talk to. "Oh no, of course there are additional conditions. My additional condition is to bring the girl in the iron box outside." Zhang Qing gently pointed to the dilapidated van outside the station. When Coulson heard this, his face suddenly became ugly. He frowned and asked tentatively, "Why do you want that girl?" "To complete the contract." "Contract? What contract?" "Magic contract. You don't think I appeared out of thin air, do you?" "No. I came in response to the summon." After that, Zhang Qing raised his front paw and gently hooked one of his fingers. Daisy Johnson, the vibrating girl who was about to awaken her ability, immediately felt as if she was out of control and flew directly over. Oh yes, she still doesn't know who her parents are and is still using the name Sky. God. Coulson. What happened? No one could remain calm in the face of a 100-meter-long dragon, so the young girl could only ask for help from the most reliable person present. Zhang Qing ignored the vigilant eyes of the people around and pretended to get close to the other's face. He asked in a deep voice, "You are the human who summoned me?" "Summoned? What summoned? I don't know. I don't know anything." Sky could not help but tremble all over. Because she was too close, she could even feel the heat coming out of the nose of this huge monster in front of her. "No. You are the one who summoned me. I can feel it. Forget it, let us complete the contract immediately, and I can leave this world as soon as possible." As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Qing knocked on the broken magic crystal above his head, which was shining with a strange light. Instantly, a very thin tentacle squeezed out from the edge of the broken magic crystal and directly pierced through the skull, parasitizing a group of cells that belonged to the mind reaver near the central nervous system of the girl's brain. Before Coulson could react to what was happening, Sky released an interesting psionic ability under the effect of severe pain. Her whole body slowly floated up, at the same time emitting a dazzling white light. "Damn it! What did you do to her?" Coulson hurriedly jumped up and grabbed the girl's left leg, angrily questioning. Chapter 513. What would happen if a black dragon with a body length of hundreds of meters suddenly appeared in the downtown area of the United States of America? Just look at the busy figures of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Although New York had just experienced a large-scale invasion of an alien fleet not long ago, and many superheroes, including the Avengers, were all displayed in front of the public, causing many people to have a high degree of immunity to superpowers, the dragon, a terrifying creature that only appears in myths and legends, is still a bit too exciting. In particular, Zhang Cheng's calmness and rationality from the beginning to the end, as well as his fluent and proficient English, have made many guys who have nothing to do have a strong interest in him. Several videos taken with mobile phones have caused a tsunami of fierce discussions on the news and social media, so much so that after more than 10 hours of tossing and turning, the well-trained agents have not been able to completely suppress the heat. Some animal protection organizations even put up banners that strongly protest against the government's imprisonment of rare species and vow to defend the rights and interests of the dragon, and gathered at the gate of Washington, D.C. to demonstrate. Anyway, in this country full of chaos and all kinds of strange ideas, there is nothing that the American people can't do. Of course, all this has nothing to do with Zhang Qing. He is now lying in the underground hangar of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Trident headquarters, enjoying delicious food provided by the world's largest intelligence organization, occasionally assisting a group of experts with a small test, and also generously giving them a small bottle of his blood. As a divine dragon, his blood is not an ordinary thing. Even a drop can greatly improve the comprehensive physical fitness of ordinary people and prolong their lifespan. He believes that with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s scientific research strength, it won't take long for them to discover a small part of the mystery. Most importantly, Hydra lurking inside will react quickly after discovering this, and then he will be able to sit on the ground and raise the price and get something he is interested in. As for whether these two groups will take any extreme measures, Zhang Qing doesn't care at all. To be precise, with the powerful power of his psionic ability, he could control all the personnel in the entire Trident headquarters in minute. Then, through the network here, he could connect to the world's largest nuclear weapons countries, allowing thousands of nuclear warheads to enter the standard launch procedure, and within a few hours, turn the Marvel Universe's Earth into an era of radiation wasteland. However, it was a pity that no one had realized how dangerous the behemoth they had brought back was. A certain one-eyed chief was still secretly rejoicing that such a huge prehistoric behemoth had not taken the initiative to harm a single person from the beginning to the end. Moreover, it had displayed a very cooperative attitude. Looking at the real-time image transmitted from the monitor, Nick Fury took a deep breath and directly asked the deputy who had just walked in, "How is it? Are the test results out? What exactly is it? Extraterrestrial life forms? Or is it a dinosaur-like life form left over from the distant era of Earth?" "I'm sorry, Chief. I can't be sure. Our scientists found some incredible substances in the blood sample provided by it, which can greatly enhance the potential of cells. The mice injected with a small amount of it almost broke an inch-thick bulletproof glass. Whether its intelligence, strength, or nerve reaction speed, all have been greatly improved, and it also has the ability to accelerate regeneration and healing. If the subject is changed to a human, I'm afraid it won't be much worse than the captain. After that, Maria Hill threw a thick stack of reports on the table, her eyes full of vigilance. There was no way not to be vigilant, because according to the speculation of the researchers in the laboratory, the life form of the creature with this kind of blood has long exceeded the scope of human understanding. In the ordinary sense, firearms were useless. Even the famous dense formation could not penetrate the biological force field surrounding the body, not to mention the mysterious liquid metal that was constantly flowing on the surface of the body and the scales that were harder than steel under the metal. But such a powerful creature did not make the slightest resistance from the beginning to the end. It obediently followed Coulson back to the Trident headquarters. God knows what was going on. You mean its blood can be used to create super soldiers? Nick Fury picked up the report and glanced at it, his face showing an expression of interest. Maria Hill nodded slightly. Maybe. We still don't know what kind of changes will happen when its blood is injected into the human body, but in theory it is correct. What about the girl that Coulson brought back? How is she now? Nick Fury continued to ask without raising his head. Her body functions are all normal, but there is a group of invading cells in the nerve center that is rapidly dividing, filling every corner of the cerebral cortex. The brain wave activity is 20 times that of ordinary people. She is still in a coma for the time being, and her life is not in danger. What did the dragon say? It said that at most half an hour later, our sleeping beauty will wake up and master a superpower called psychic ability. Maria Hill shrugged and replied. Psychic ability? Nick Fury subconsciously touched his bald head. Yes. According to its explanation, it should be a way of idealism and self-affirmation to obtain the ability to interfere with matter and energy. It is very powerful and very mysterious. During the experiment, the dragon could not only easily invade the mind of every agent, but it could also make the invaded target obey its will through illusions and suggestions. It even created a miniature black hole out of thin air. When she thought of the black hole that appeared out of thin air in the hangar 2 or 3 hours ago, Maria Hill couldn't help but shudder. She couldn't imagine if the black hole would engulf the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, or even the entire Earth, once it expanded infinitely. Damn it! It is even more dangerous than those Chitauri? Invading minds, controlling humans, creating black holes, no matter which one it was, it made Nick Fury shudder. He couldn't imagine what the Earth would be like if the other party suddenly attacked the top government officials of various countries. Maria Hill obviously knew what the director was worried about, and she lowered her voice and suggested, I think it is best to keep this information secret for the time being. Don't let the outside world know about it, otherwise it is likely to cause a strong panic. At least don't act rashly until you have a weapon to kill it. I will leave this matter to you. Remember, be sure to make sure that all participants keep their mouths shut. In addition, arrange a meeting. I need to sit down and talk with this dragon to figure out where it came from and what its purpose is for coming to Earth. At the same time, in another office at Trident headquarters, Hydra leader Alexander Pierce was also reading the report sent by his men. Chapter 514. With the sudden appearance of Zhang Qing, the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. Trident headquarters can be described as a dark tide surging, especially Hydra, who is extremely obsessed with supernatural powers, almost couldn't help but launch an attack in advance and turn S.H.I.E.L.D. into their own pocket. However, Alexander Pierce finally suppressed the restlessness in his heart and didn't do anything that he shouldn't do. He knew that such a powerful, mysterious, and intelligent creature could not be controlled by ordinary people. The most ideal way was to understand the other party's needs through contact and then reach some cooperation intentions. Due to his current convenient identity, he didn't need to appear in person at all. He would wait for Nick Fury to sound it out first. The one-eyed director had no idea that his old boss was full of schemes and plots. He was standing in the underground parking lot, looking up at the huge and oppressive body of the Black Dragon. Similarly, Zhang Qing was also looking at the braised egg director. A playful smile appeared on his ferocious face as he greeted him calmly. "Good afternoon, Director Nick Fury. You didn't come here in person just to see me up close, did you? You've seen me before?" Nick Fury frowned subconsciously. "To a certain extent, yes. I've seen your face from the memories of those agents." Zhang Qing didn't hide his power at all and admitted it openly. Even in the Faerun continent where supernatural forces were rampant, the psychic ability was still an extremely rare and bizarre ability. The most powerful thing about it was that it had no fixed form and mainly depended on the personality and imagination of the user. Coupled with the enhancement of broken magic crystals and the Mind Flayer's brain cells, it was easier for Zhang Qing to read the memory area of an unsuspecting brain than it was for him to eat and drink. Simply put, 99% of the people in this world were like a USB flash drive that stored a lot of data. He could read it at any time without being discovered. Nick Fury seemed to have realized something. He immediately gritted his teeth and warned, "Damn it! Don't pry into my brain. You're invading my privacy and confidentiality." "Don't worry, I didn't pry into your brain. Even if I did, it wouldn't affect me. After all, my principle is that other than protecting the life of the person who signed the contract within the stipulated time, I will never participate in or interfere with anything that happens within the human race." Zhang Qing pretended to be innocent and spread out his paws. "Do not interfere? What do you mean?" Nick Fury keenly grasped the key words. "To put it simply, no matter what happens to your world, be it a civil war, a fratricide, or the invasion of foreign species, or the destruction of the world, I will always appreciate it from the perspective of a bystander. Even if the last human being dies under my feet, I will not save him, nor will I join any organization in any form. You can think of me as a strictly neutral person who doesn't have the so-called concept of good and evil, right and wrong," Zhang Qing explained as he threw the golden roasted turkey into his mouth and chewed slowly. Since arriving at this place, he had eaten almost 100 turkeys, 2,000 pounds of beef, and 20 whole roasted pigs. If it weren't for Shield's wealth, it is estimated that they would be impoverished by this terrifying amount of food. In fact, with his divinity, he no longer needed to rely on food to maintain his life. But out of habit and love for the taste of food, if conditions permit, he would never miss a meal. "I see. I think I understand now." Nick Fury nodded thoughtfully. Although he didn't fully believe the other party's promise, this position and attitude were a good start. At least it wouldn't pose too much of a threat. Noticing the flash of relaxation in the braised egg director's eyes, Zhang Qing immediately struck, while the iron was hot, and continued to bewitch the other party. "Actually, you don't have to worry too much about me. According to the content of the contract, I will only stay in your world for a year or two at most. When the human girl masters her psionic powers, I will leave directly and never appear again." "Where did you come from? A distant planet in the universe?" Nick Fury was obviously very interested in this. "No. I came from another world. To be exact, I killed a lot of gods, and as a result, I was attacked by the other gods. I just heard the girl's call, and then I came to your world with the help of the power of the contract. If it were any other time, I wouldn't even care about such a weak summoner." Zhang Qing introduced the reason for his appearance, half true and half false. "God. You killed a god." The one-eyed director's face showed a surprised expression. After all, the only god that Earth had encountered so far was the Asgardians in Norse mythology. The representative was the god of thunder, Thor, who was the main fighting force of the Avengers. His strength was completely incomparable to the people on Earth. He couldn't imagine how powerful a creature that could kill Thor and escape from a group of Thors was. "That's right. I still have some left here. Do you want it?" Zhang Qing loosened the reins and took out a finger that belonged to the god of war, Tempest, from his magic waist bag. When Nick Fury saw this scene, his pupils suddenly shrank, and he asked with a serious expression, "What do I have to pay?" It's very simple. Some of the currency of your world. I found that you don't use gold or gems as payment here. In addition, I have to stay with the girl. According to the contents of the contract, I need to teach her to control her own power within 2 years. As the last word fell, Zhang Cheng's body began to shrink rapidly, and finally turned into human form. You're a human? Nick Fury's mouth opened wide in shock, as if it was a little difficult for him to accept the fact that a huge creature had turned into a human in just a few seconds. Zhang Qing smiled and shrugged. No, this is just a kind of innate transformation magic. Any dragon that has entered the youth stage can do it. Okay, I agree. But you have to promise that you will try your best not to turn back into a dragon, or it will make things difficult for me. Thank you very much. Now, this finger is yours. Oh, by the way, if you plan to use this finger or my blood to create a super soldier, you'd better be a little more careful. It's because our blood and cells contain something called divinity, which can stimulate a person's full potential to the maximum, even including the desire in the heart. Divinity. Nick Fury suddenly had a bad feeling. Chapter 5:15. How attractive is divinity to mortals? S.H.I.E.L.D. and the watchdog behind it, the World Security Council, aside, within a few days, Alexander Pierce, one of Hydra's leaders, couldn't hold back his ambitions. With the help of his authority, he secretly took out a small part of muscle tissue from the storage room and gave it to his men to start inhumane human experiments. In a secret research lab located in Mexico, dozens of researchers were busy injecting the newly extracted golden serum into the bodies of 6 strong adult males. There is no doubt that these people are all loyal to Hydra. In particular, John Garrett, who is in charge of supervising the whole process, squints his eyes and watches the reaction of each experimental subject to judge whether this thing called divinity can save his declining life. You know, Hydra is not a shield that needs to be both a bitch and a monument. They don't care about the trouble of media reports, public relations, and the like. As long as the top makes a decision, the bottom will quickly take action, even if it costs a lot of sacrifices, or the lives and property damage of civilians. It doesn't matter. To some extent, it wouldn't be a bad thing if Hydra replaced S.H.I.E.L.D. and took control of the entire Western world. At the very least, work efficiency will be doubled, and all kinds of bad criminal rates will be reduced rapidly, creating an absolutely orderly and stable living environment. By the way, the military-industrial complex, which can almost be said to be a cancer, and the Wall Street consortium that kidnaps the entire country to serve itself, crushing the privileged class that controls 99% of the wealth, rights, and resources. As for the bullshit freedom and democracy, in this information age, I'm afraid that only idiots will believe it. After all, the most basic need of human beings is survival, so material is the first priority. Under the premise that the most basic necessities of clothing, food, shelter, and transportation cannot be met, anyone who talks about morality is a hooligan. Just as John Garrett stood at the door and waited a little impatiently, one of the experimental subjects lying on the hospital bed suddenly reacted violently. Ah! Accompanied by a painful scream, the Caucasian man, who was about 25 years old and covered with strong muscles, suddenly jumped into the air. His veins swelled like earthworms, and he directly raised his fist and smashed the wall in front of him. Boom! After a loud noise, a 20-centimeter thick reinforced concrete wall was directly smashed into a hole. Oh my God! This is just awesome! John Garrett raised the corners of his mouth, showing an excited expression. Damn it! This guy is out of control. Quick! Give him a sedative. Soldiers! Subdue him! The researchers hurriedly shouted and tried to pin down the unlucky guy who had been devoured by the divinity. Unfortunately, they had underestimated the influence of divinity on mortals. In the blink of an eye, more than 12 fully armed soldiers were knocked to the ground. Be it tranquilizers, or armor-piercing bullets, they were all ineffective. Even the shattered heads and hearts were slowly recovering under the effect of some unknown force. Powerful. His strength was beyond everyone's imagination. John Garrett could not believe that a mere 1/10 of the cell tissue extracted from the finger of a mysterious creature could turn an elite soldier into a monster comparable to Captain America. Even Steve Rogers might not have such a terrifying self-healing ability. No. It would be more appropriate to call it an immortal body. Fortunately, this self-healing ability was not limitless. When the tiny amount of divinity was exhausted, the experimental subject quickly collapsed and dissolved into a pool of sticky unknown substance in just a few minutes. At the same time, the other 5 experimental subjects also woke up one after another. 2 of them were in the same situation as the first one, becoming monsters that only knew how to destroy and kill. The remaining 3 maintained their sanity perfectly and began to eat crazily, absorbing the nutrients that their bodies desperately desired. No one noticed that the pupils of these 3 people would occasionally flash with a golden light. That was a sign of divinity awakening, and at the same time, it was also the first step from mortals to transcendence. It would not be long before they would obtain some incredible power. At the same time, their personalities would change drastically, and their ambitions and desires would increase exponentially. But John Garrett had not noticed this for the time being. The success rate of 50% made him ecstatic, and he quickly reported the results of the experiment to Alexander Pierce. The latter did not say anything and immediately issued an order to steal as much of that magical finger as possible without alarming Nick Fury. At the same time, he was prepared to make contact with another black dragon that could provide similar blood. As for the culprit behind all these changes, Zhang Qing was currently in his human form, sitting openly on a modified airliner, flipping through a large number of books and cutting-edge papers on quantum physics while guiding the famous Shockwave Girl to practice her psionic ability. Ever since she obtained the cells of the Mind Flayer's brain, Sky had only slept for 17 hours before regaining consciousness. Then, she discovered that she had acquired eidetic memory, extraordinary memory, and incredible learning and comprehension abilities. Of course, the most important thing was that she had mastered a magical power. With just a thought, she could control objects that were no more than 200 grams to move at will. As a superpower fangirl, was there anything more exciting than this? Therefore, she easily accepted the fact that she had unintentionally summoned a dragon, and she kept experimenting day and night, as if she wanted to develop a very powerful sure-kill skill. Watching her move a glass up and down for a long time, Zhang Qing finally could not help but remind her, "Remember, psionic ability is a power that comes from the heart. Its strength depends on the self-recognition in your subconscious mind. Only if you firmly believe that you can do it, then you can create miracles. This is not science, and it does not conform to the common sense you already know. It is a distortion of reality." "You mean, I can do it as long as I want to?" Sky's eyes widened, and an expression of disbelief appeared on her face. "That's right. Do you still remember the dream you had when you were unconscious?" Zhang Qing put down the thick book in his hand, raised his head, and asked with a faint smile. You mean the other me?" Sky hesitated for a moment, and quickly and carefully probed. It was clear that she had never understood what had happened to her in that dream. Chapter 5:16. Impossible. This is completely against the common sense of physics. Leo Fitz, who was responsible for providing technical and logistical support to the team, finally could not help but refute. As a highly educated mechanical engineer and electronic engineer, he did not believe that there was anything in the world that could easily change the atomic and molecular structure of matter. "Oh? Is that so?" Zhang Qing pursed his lips meaningfully as he reached out a finger and gently tapped on the glass. After just 1 second, the glass began to undergo an incredible change. Under the gaze of several pairs of eyes, it turned into a sparkling diamond glass. "Oh my God! How is this possible?" Gemma Simmons ran out of the lab and picked up the glass, trying to figure out what had just happened. After about 2 to 3 minutes, she raised her head and nodded lightly at her colleague and good friend, Fitz, indicating that this thing was indeed a diamond structure. The latter was stunned as he stuttered, not knowing what to say to ease the awkward atmosphere. From his denial to the slap in the face, it only took a little more than a minute. It was too fast. Ha 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 ha. Seeing Fitz's embarrassed look, Skye finally laughed out loud. However, she did not forget about the training of superpowers. She quickly asked, turning glass into diamond. How did you do it? It's very simple. Power. As long as you are strong enough, there are many ways to change the structure of matter. You can even transform matter and energy freely, just like this. As he spoke, Zhang Qing picked up the glass and activated the power of the alchemy stone. Instantly, the sparkling diamond suddenly turned into water, and then the water turned into different substances such as gold, silver, steel, wood, fire, stone, and so on. It happened so fast that it was too much for the eyes to take in. Just as many people were immersed in the incredible scene in front of them, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Snap! The glass that was in a liquid state a second ago immediately turned back into its original glass state. Oh my God! It's like magic! Will I be able to do this one day? Skye clenched her fist excitedly. Hee, of course. But are you sure that what you saw just now was the truth and not an illusion? Zhang Qing looked into the other party's eyes and proposed a hypothesis with great interest. Because it was a holiday, he did not intend to do anything in this world, let alone join the Avengers, or go to the front to feel the power of Infinity Stone. Instead, he was prepared to follow Coulson, who was relatively less dangerous, until the woman who claimed to be the creator sent him back. The reason was simple: whether it was the Infinity Stone or the sorcerers living in seclusion in Camartage, they were not attractive to him. The former was the embodiment of a certain law of this universe. Once he left this world, he would immediately lose the powerful strength he originally possessed. It was not worth the effort. Similarly, he could do all of the magic powers that the latter had mastered. Even the so-called Supreme Sorcerer Ancient One could not compare to the Divine Dragon except for the Time Gem. As for the messy advanced technology, the only thing that was useful to Zhang Qing was the quantum physics research report, especially the part about the structure of matter. This precious knowledge helped him quickly improve his alchemy level. After all, for alchemists, the more they understand the structure of matter, the faster the transformation and the less their own consumption. What do you mean? Was what I just saw not true? Skye frowned subconsciously. Zhang Qing shook his head with a smile and explained, No, I mean, do you have the ability to figure out the difference between reality and illusion? What is illusion? What is reality? In fact, all your cognition originates from the perceptual organs such as eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, and then through the brain to analyze, understand, and remember, and finally form a huge and complex feedback system. Just like when you pick up a piece of fried chicken, you can immediately realize that it is food, and you can also confirm that it is rich in nutrients and calories. I don't understand. Don't interrupt, let me finish. Zhang Qing ignored the puzzled expression on the girl's face and continued, In fact, it is not difficult to deceive the brain, especially for us who have mastered the psionic ability. As a master of the psionic ability, you have to learn to question everything around you from now on. The so-called truth is not important in our eyes at all. What matters is whether you believe it is true. If you believe it, then even if it is not true, it will become true. If you don't believe it, even if it is true, it will become false. My God! You mean, if this power called the psionic ability can affirm or deny the existence of a person or object? Gemma Simmons was worthy of being a top student of S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy. She was the first to understand the meaning of the words, and her mouth opened in surprise. Oh, you are very smart. Yes, this is the greatness of the psionic ability. It can unknowingly change everything according to the wishes of the user. But this is only in theory. At least I haven't seen anyone who can train their psionic ability to change the world. After saying this, Zhang Qing ignored everyone and continued to read the books and papers at hand. Through the monitor, Carlson saw everything that had just happened and quickly raised his head and asked his old partner, "What do you think of him?" "What do you mean?" May asked blankly. "Character. Don't you think that as a terrible dragon, he is a little too rational? I think this is a good thing, at least we don't have to worry about him going out to cause trouble all day, do we? I don't understand why the director allowed him to take our plane." Carlson whispered, quickly picked up the cup and drank the amber liquid inside, turned and walked towards his room. Watching him disappear around the corner, May breathed a sigh of relief and quickly got into the cabin, opened the secret phone hidden behind the panel, and dialed the only number. About a second or two later, Nick Fury's voice came through the microphone. "How is it? Is everything going well?" "Yes, everything is going well. Whether it's Carlson or the dragon, both of them are unbelievably normal." "Very good. Continue to monitor closely for me. If you find anything unusual about that guy, or if he is in contact with anyone, report to me immediately." "Got it. Keep in touch." Keep in touch. Chapter 517. Eating, sleeping, reading, and occasionally instructing the future vibrator on how to use the newly acquired psychic ability. For a long time, Zhang Qing showed what a neutral attitude was all about. Even if his Airbus was hijacked by the enemy or attacked, he did not react at all, let alone stand up at the critical moment to be a hero. To be exact, no matter what kind of enemy it is, they will subconsciously ignore his existence, as if they did not see him at all. Even if someone else talks to him, the other party will turn a blind eye. In such a strange situation, not to mention a group of rookies who have just entered the industry, even Carlson, a senior agent who has seen big scenes and has been in contact with countless supernatural forces, was full of surprise. However, knowing Zhang Cheng's true attitude, he did not go too deep to inquire about how much incredible mysterious power a mythical black dragon had mastered, and he also forbade his men to do so. This state of peace continued until some reckless idiot shot the heroine, and another senior member of Hydra hidden inside S.H.I.E.L.D., clairvoyant John Garrett, finally appeared. There is no need to ask, this guy wants to take the opportunity to use Carlson's hand to find the mysterious Tahiti project, that is, the resurrection medicine made with the body and blood of the Kori people, GH 325. After all, so far, using the mysterious power contained in the unknown biological finger to create a super soldier project, although several experimental subjects have successfully survived and have terrifying power that ordinary people can't match, the scientists engaged in the research have never figured out what the substance is at work, let alone improving the success rate of the experiment. Maybe it doesn't matter if it's just using this thing to create a super soldier. Anyway, a success rate of about 50% is enough to satisfy Hydra executives, but for John Garrett, whose life is threatened, a success rate of 50% is like gambling with his life. In contrast, the Tahiti project, which successfully resurrected Carlson, is obviously much more reliable. Of course, before leaving, he did not forget to test Zhang Cheng's attitude towards S.H.I.E.L.D., until the latter made it clear that he would not care about the fight between humans, and then he left satisfied. Watching the conspirators' plane disappear at the end of the sea of clouds, Zhang Qing slightly curled his lips and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Aha, the boring days are finally over. War, killing, betrayal, death, that's what I'm looking forward to. I hope Hydra will be more interesting than S.H.I.E.L.D." As soon as he finished speaking, he glanced meaningfully at Grant Ward, who was drinking not far away. He then stood up and said to everyone in the cabin with a smile, "I'm very sorry, everyone. I'm afraid I'll have to excuse myself for a while." "What do you mean? Where are you going?" Coulson's face showed a vigilant expression. Relax, I'm just a little tired of staying on the plane for a long time. I plan to buy a few books and eat some delicious food. If there's anything, you can call me. As he spoke, Zhang Qing waved the very advanced multifunction phone in his hand and directly turned invisible, passing through the wall and falling from a height of tens of thousands of meters. Damn it! Quick! Contact the director! Coulson shouted at his old partner, Melinda. The latter also realized the seriousness of the problem and nodded without saying a word and immediately ran to the upper area. In less than a dozen seconds or so, the news that the dangerous target was out of control was sent to the desk of Nick Fury at S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Trident headquarters. Unfortunately, the one-eyed director was not in the office at the moment, so the news was intercepted by Alexander Pierce. Without saying a word, he picked up the phone and informed his confidant, Crossbones Brockrum, indicating that the latter should immediately go to the crash site to meet the mysterious creature with terrifying power. It has to be said that the technology of the Marvel Universe's Earth is far more advanced than any of the Earths that Zhang Qing has ever experienced. Perhaps due to the influence of the appearance technology, cutting-edge technologies such as super chips, high-capacity storage devices, ultra-long standby batteries, 3D holographic images, etc., are all integrated into the palm-sized mobile phone. Whether it is the Earth he was born on or the magic Earth, it can instantly trigger a technological revolution and bring endless wealth to the holder. But unfortunately, these things are meaningless to him. He has gotten rid of the low-level desires of pursuing so-called wealth, power, and fame. Instead, he is moving toward higher goals such as power and immortality. With a strong airflow blowing past his cheeks, he soon saw the light on the ground. At the moment when he was about to come into close contact with the ground, he took out a small piece of liquid metal wrapped in rings from his pocket. Instantly, his whole body seemed to be affected by some kind of anti-gravity effect as he floated in the air and finally slowly landed on the top floor of a building. There is no doubt that this small group of liquid metal is nothing else but a mysterious substance that he came into contact with not long ago, gravity? However, this small group was not stolen from under S.H.I.E.L.D.'s nose. He created it out of thin air by combining alchemy and particle structure. Just creating such a small amount consumed nearly 1/5 of the magic energy in his body. In fact, these days, Zhang Qing has been practicing his alchemy skills, because he can feel that there is an incredible thing in his body that is about to break out of its shell, and alchemy is the key to breaking the final shell. Admiring the night view of the city from above, Zhang Qing put away the gadget in his hand and asked without looking back, "How long are you going to stand at the door? Do you want me to invite you out?" As the last word was blurted out, the security door on the top floor of the building was blown away by an unknown force with a bang, then twisted, compressed, and finally turned into a smooth metal ball. Click, click. The fully armed soldiers hiding in the passage were obviously startled. They opened the safety and raised the automatic rifles in their hand. "Bastard! Put down the gun, if you don't want to die!" The guy in the lead yelled loudly. As the temporary commander of the team, he learned from the mouth of his boss that the seemingly harmless young man in front of him had terrifying power. The slightest carelessness could cause the entire team to be wiped out. Although the soldiers were somewhat reluctant, they finally chose to obey the order and put down the weapons in their hands. Chapter 518. Cars, speedboats, planes, escorted by the militants under the control of Hydra, Zhang Qing soon arrived at a rather luxurious country villa. Standing at the door of the villa was none other than Alexander Pierce, and standing next to him were Crossbones Brockrum, Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes, Hitwell, and John Garrett. Anyway, the Hydra executives lurking in S.H.I.E.L.D. are almost all here. Looking at these familiar and strange faces, Zhang Qing deliberately pretended to be casual and shrugged his shoulders. "Please explain, who are you and what is your purpose in bringing me here? I'm very sorry to invite you in such a rude way. But please believe me, It's all out of helplessness. A great creature like you deserves more respect than pretending to be a mortal." Alexander Pierce took the lead and bowed deeply with one hand on his chest in a very reverent tone. As a leader of Hydra, he is no different from other leaders. He has a fanatical obsession with supernatural powers, especially when he learned that the blood of the Black Dragon in front of him can create thousands of super soldiers comparable to Captain America. "You haven't told me your name yet. In my hometown, when people express kindness and sincerity, they usually start by announcing their names." Zhang Qing hinted with a smile. "My name is Alexander Pierce, the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I have another identity. That is, the Supreme Commander of Hydra lurking inside S.H.I.E.L.D. I believe that with the power you have, it's easy to find out, isn't it?" Alexander Pierce introduced himself with a smile. Although he is no longer the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury is also a guy who likes to hide secrets, there were too many people who carried out comprehensive inspections and tests for Zhang Qing at that time. In particular, his ability to invade the brain, flip through the memories of the agents at will, and even make the agents obey orders through hypnosis and other means is simply impressive to the extreme. So, Zhang Qing showed an innocent expression on his face. "You should know that we, Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D., are enemies, right? And many of the agents who carried out the tests were loyal to Hydra, but you didn't expose them, which gave me a guess. Today, I want to confirm this guess," Alexander Pierce explained straightforwardly. Zhang Qing nodded thoughtfully. "I see. But my answer may disappoint you a little. Strictly speaking, I am not inclined to either side, that is, S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra. I don't care who is in power, I will never get involved." "Haha, no, this answer is already very good news for us. In addition, would you like to make some deals with us? I promise that I will never let outsiders know the contents of these transactions," Alexander Pierce said as he made an inviting gesture and led the way into the villa. Through the exquisite garden, the group came to the hall filled with all kinds of fine food and wine. Judging from the dishes on the table, he has obviously inquired about Zhang Qing's food preferences, and the supply is sufficient to fill the appetite of a dragon with a body length of hundreds of meters. "I'm starting to like you a little, Mr. Pierce." Zhang Qing picked up the plate and tasted a small piece of rib with satisfaction in his eyes. There is no doubt that compared to the fast food provided by S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra is undoubtedly sincere. Every dish is cooked by a top chef, which greatly satisfies the appetite of the taste buds. It must be known that he is not eating to replenish energy, but simply for enjoyment. The more delicious something is, the higher the enjoyment. Alexander Pierce saw this and hurriedly showed a flattering smile. "I'm glad you are satisfied. If you don't mind, can I talk about the contents of the deal now?" "Of course. Please." Zhang Qing opened his mouth wide and slowly poured a large plate of pork ribs that weighed 2 to 3 kilograms into his mouth. The sound of chewing made one's hair stand on end. The reason why it was creepy was because he had even chewed and swallowed all the bones. Among them, there were several thick leg bones. Just this bite force alone had already surpassed any existing carnivore on Earth. "First of all, I want to get some of your blood." "My blood? Don't tell me you're—" Zhang Qing threw down the empty plate and quickly glanced at the bodyguard behind him. Sure enough, 3 of the adult males contained weak divinity, and because of the addition of unknown things, their bones, muscles, and skin were dozens of times stronger than ordinary people. "Yes. Using that finger and the technology we have at hand, we created 6 super soldiers. What you see now are 3 of them. Between the launch of Project Insight, I need more of these soldiers to destroy the resistance within S.H.I.E.L.D. In return, you can ask for anything, and I promise that as long as we can do it, we will unconditionally satisfy you." After that, Alexander Pierce stopped and looked into the other person's eyes, expecting a positive answer. He believed that since the other person didn't expose him, there must be some possibility of cooperation. Otherwise, as long as he made a small move, Nick Fury would be able to detect traces of Hydra's existence. A trace of mockery flashed across Zhang Cheng's face, and he replied without thinking, "Yes. I happen to have a wish list here. If you can send it to me within 48 hours, I will agree to provide you with 2 liters of my blood, enough for you to create hundreds of super soldiers. But the premise is that you have to give me the other potion formula mixed in the bodies of those soldiers." "No problem. We Hydra are very sincere." Alexander Pierce took the slip of paper, which was full of tiny words, and glanced at it briefly before a satisfied smile appeared on his face. There was no way not to be satisfied. Most of the things on this note were S.H.I.E.L.'s existing assets, such as Quinjet, some relatively rare elements, a large number of relatively advanced individual combat heavy firepower weapons, and ammunition. Anyway, a trip to the warehouse would give him as much as he wanted. Although he didn't understand what a dragon with terrible supernatural powers wanted these things for, it was a good thing that the other party had needs. What's more, compared to 2 liters of dragon blood, this price was nothing. "In that case, I will wait here for your news. Remember, my patience is very limited. If the things on the list are not collected after 48 hours, the consequences will be very, very serious." Chapter 519. Hydra's actions are always fast and efficient. In just a dozen hours, all the items on the list were transported to the villa. They even prepared an additional yacht that looked like a large yacht on the surface, but in fact it was equipped with an advanced nuclear power system. The rear deck was equipped with 2 landing aprons that could take down Quinjet or helicopters. The decoration was extremely luxurious with a total length of more than 230 meters. It was clearly designed and manufactured by Hydra's top management to meet their own need. It was not something that could be bought with money. Looking at the behemoth docked at the villa's seaside dock, Zhang Qing turned his head and asked Alexander Pierce with a smile, "Can you explain what this means?" "Nothing else, just a small gift, I hope you like it." The latter had a faint smile on his face, as if to say that such a priceless yacht was not worth mentioning. In fact, it was indeed so. As one of the few people standing at the top of the huge organization, the wealth, power, and technology he controlled were far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. As long as the Operation Insight could be successfully implemented, everything was worth it. "Using a yacht to test my preferences? Have you forgotten that I can invade a person's brain at any time and read their deepest memories and thoughts?" Zhang Qing mercilessly exposed the other party's thoughts. With the growth of his psionic ability, ordinary people had no secrets in front of him. With just a thought, he could instantly know the psychological activities of all human beings within a radius of 1 kilometer. "No, I never forgot. I just want to reach some consensus between you and us. Please believe me, Hydra will always be able to give you much more than S.H.I.E.L.D. Alexander Pierce lowered his voice and hinted. "I've already said that I won't interfere in the battle between the 2 of you, so please don't continue with these boring little actions." After saying that, Zhang Qing opened his mouth that was filled with sharp teeth and started chanting the draconic language. In just a dozen seconds, the huge yacht began to shrink rapidly and eventually became a model-like gadget about 20 centimeters in length. At the same time, several multifunctional Quinjets with different focuses and trucks full of arms were also shrinking. After doing all this, he gently crooked his finger and put all these technological products that were at least 60 to 70 years more advanced than the magical Earth into his magic waste bag, planning to take them back in case of emergency. At the very least, he would be able to travel a little faster when exploring inaccessible places. However, Alexander Pierce obviously didn't know this. He stared dumbfoundedly at the planes, trucks, and yachts that had been shrunk in the same proportion. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. After a few minutes, he finally came back to his senses and asked in a slightly excited tone, "How did you do it? Technology or magic?" "Magic," Zhang Qing answered casually. Whether it was in the Faerun continent or the world of Azeroth, shrinking or enlarging an object was an application in the field of arcane magic. Generally speaking, the higher the spellcasting level, the more precise the control of energy, and the higher the ratio of reduction or enlargement. Of course, the spell that he cast just now combined the advantages of the two worlds. As long as there was no spell that disturbed the stable magical energy around the shrunken object, the object would not suddenly revert to its original state due to the passage of time. Magic? Will it be widely disseminated? The eyes of Alexander Pierce shone with the most eager light. If you're referring to whether humans can learn it, the answer is yes, they can. But the premise is that this person must be very smart and need 30 to 50 years of learning to barely shrink an object to 1/20th of its original size. If I were you, I would never think of anything else at this critical time. Instead, I would focus on Project Insight. Don't think that you have a sure win. Nick Fury is not as easy to deal with as you think. Zhang Qing gave a meaningful warning. Arrogance is the natural enemy of success. Looking at the short history of mankind, it was easy to find countless unlucky people who were only one step away from success, but their arrogance led to their failure. He was looking forward to seeing what the Marvel Universe would be like if Hydra's Project Insight succeeded. Alexander Pierce smiled reservedly and shook his head. I know Nick Fury very well. Every decision he makes is within my expectations. There is no way he can turn the tables. What's more than half of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s members have pledged allegiance to Hydra, and no one can stop our rise. Is that so? Then I'll wait and see. Oh yes, this is the blood I promised you. In addition, I'm very satisfied with your little gift, so I'll give you an extra gadget. With that, Zhang Qing handed a large bottle of dragon blood and a translucent crystal ball to the other party. What is this? Alexander Pierce handed the dragon blood to Brock Rum next to him and raised the translucent crystal ball in his palm to observe it carefully. In the center of the crystal ball, there was a flowing silver liquid that was constantly changing shape, as if it was alive. A very interesting gadget. As long as you break it in front of Captain America, I guarantee that Steve Rogers will immediately defect and pledge allegiance to Hydra. Zhang Qing cracked a very ferocious smile. Captain America pledges allegiance to Hydra? Are you sure this is not a joke? Alexander Pierce's face was full of incredulity. In his eyes, even if the whole world was under the rule of Hydra, Captain America would never bow to Hydra. The relationship between the two sides has long surpassed the hatred in the ordinary sense and has been sublimated to the essential conflict of consciousness, philosophy, worldview, and values, which is an absolutely irreconcilable contradiction. I never joke. Think about it, if Steve Rogers kneels in front of you and shouts, "Long live Hydra," in front of the world audience, what a spectacular scene it will be. At that time, the liberal democracy advocated by the entire Western world will inevitably be shattered on the spot, and the army and ordinary people will become powerless to resist. Zhang Qing is like a devil at the moment, whispering in the ears of Hydra's senior executives. Every word seems to have magic, full of inexplicable restlessness. No Hydra senior executive can resist the temptation of Captain America kneeling in front of him and shouting, "Long live Hydra." Once they do this, they will surpass John Schmidt, the Red Skull, who was known as Hydra's greatest leader during World War II. Chapter 520. Alexander Pierce left and returned to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Trident headquarters with all his cronies and fiery ambitions to make the final preparations for the Insight Plan. At the same time, he fantasized about Captain America, who has become the spiritual pillar of the Western world, kneeling in front of him and shouting, "Long live Hydra." For him, maybe this is equivalent to sitting on the throne of the Empire and being crowned as the Supreme Emperor. Of course, if he can extend his life and get some powerful superpowers, that would be great. In fact, 1/3 of the 2 liters of Dragon's blood was allocated to the longevity plan. The purpose of this plan is not to obtain weapons of war like super soldiers, but to give Hydra's top executives and important scientists a longer lifespan and to prevent a series of internal power struggles such as poisoning, assassination, and so on every time Hydra's leader dies naturally. Of course, all of this has nothing to do with Zhang Qing, because after completing the transaction, he also left the villa and took a civil aviation flight with the special ID given by SHIELD to the administrative center of the United States, Washington, D.C., where he strolled alone along the street and occasionally sat down in a roadside restaurant or cafe to eat something and flip through the new books he just bought from the bookstore. Needless to say, he was waiting for a good show in the head-on conflict between Hydra and SHIELD. But unfortunately, before the good show began, Nick Fury appeared with Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, and Captain America, Steve Rogers. Looking at the one-eyed chief sitting across the table, Zhang Qing closed the Advanced Quantum Mechanics in his hand, raised his head and greeted with a smile. "Good afternoon, would any of you like a cup of grapefruit tea? I found that the grapefruit tea in this shop tastes quite good. It warms up the whole body and helps to relieve nervous tension." "No, thank you, I'm afraid grapefruit tea can't relieve my current mental state." Nick Fury shook his head blankly. "Also, can you please tell me where you went after jumping out of Coulson's plane? Have you seen anyone?" "Oh? Why do you ask?" Zhang Qing deliberately pretended to be innocent and blinked. "Because you disappeared from our site for a full 28 hours. No consumption records. Not captured by any monitoring equipment. Even the cell phone signal was blocked. I suspect that you're in contact with someone or an organization behind our backs, which could be a huge threat." Nick Fury didn't beat around the bush and directly stated his intentions. Perhaps it wasn't a big deal for others to disappear for more than a day. At most, he would just have to keep an eye on them. However, the power of this gigantic dragon in human skin was far too great. It was so great that it could threaten the safety of the entire world. Even if it were to disappear for just a minute, it would make him feel nervous. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't take him down, he would have used all the resources and power at hand to kill or imprison him and throw him into a secret base that no one would ever find. Zhang Qing was not a fool. Of course, he knew what the one-eyed chief was thinking. He casually took a sip of the pomelo tea and said, "So you came to ask me where I went? Who did he meet? Am I a prisoner? You have to know that according to the laws of this country, what you just said is a complete violation of personal privacy. I have the right to call a lawyer for myself and let him talk to you about the next part." "Pooh." The straightforward Steve Rogers obviously hadn't seen anyone talk back to the braised egg and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Natasha also slightly raised the corner of her mouth and didn't hide the smile on her face. They didn't expect that a terrifying dragon in myths and legends would speak so humorously and even know how to use the law as a weapon. Nick Fury's face was frighteningly gloomy. He glared at the other two people and retorted with gritted teeth, "First of all, you are not a citizen of this country. You are not even human. You are not protected by the judicial system at all. Secondly, I promise that no lawyer will be willing to defend you. Finally, and most importantly, the sooner you explain, the better it will be for you and for us." "Well, it's okay to tell you. I did go to a place to meet a few people under the escort of a mercenary team and made some deals with them," Zhang Qing explained as he picked up the teapot and poured a cup of steaming pomelo tea for Black Widow and Captain America. "Thank you very much." Steve Rogers, who had always believed in being kind to others, took the cup and thanked him. He had no idea that this seemingly harmless young man had prepared a big surprise for him that could change his fate. Natasha, on the other hand, picked up the cup and sipped the hot tea elegantly. Her eyes were constantly scanning the other party's body. She wasn't sure if the body weapon she was best at would work on a prehistoric beast that was more than 100 meters long. "Who are they? What is the content of the deal?" Nick Fury suddenly had a bad feeling and frowned subconsciously. They called themselves Hydra. They used some rare elements, luxury yachts, airplanes, and other gadgets to exchange 2 liters of blood with me. Zhang Qing had no intention of covering up for Alexander Pierce from beginning to end. He openly stated the content of the deal and the target. Of course, as a person who took the initiative to embrace the darkness, he deliberately skipped some of the most important information. After all, the braised egg didn't ask, so he naturally wouldn't take the initiative to answer. What? Hydra? Are you sure? Before the one-eyed director could react, Steve Rogers stood up excitedly. Zhang Qing nodded without thinking. Yes, at least that's what they claim to be, and they seem to be planning an important plan recently. Damn it. You actually gave them your blood. Nick Fury's focus was obviously slightly different from Captain America's. Although S.H.I.E.L.D. hasn't carried out any super soldier project, scientists in Central have analyzed that the mysterious substance contained in the dragon's blood is enough to give life forms great power. He couldn't imagine how dangerous the whole world would become once some terrorist organizations got their hands on it and created 20 or 30 super soldiers comparable to Captain America. What? I have to be restricted from who I sell my blood to. Isn't free trade advocated here? Is there a problem with my understanding? Zhang Qing continued to play dumb. Chapter 521. You're quibbling. Tell me, who are these people? I believe that with your ability, it's easy to figure out their identity, isn't it? Nick Fury was obviously enraged. His body leaned forward slightly, and his only eye was glowing with anger. If it weren't for the fact that there were many ordinary people around, he would definitely kick the table in front of him so that the other party could feel the anger in his heart that was about to explode. Looking at the ferocious face of the one-eyed chief, Zhang Qing smiled casually and comforted him. Calm down, you should know very well that anger is the most meaningless emotion in the world. The only thing it can do is quickly reduce your IQ and judgment. Although I'm not going to tell you their true identity, I'm willing to give you a little hint. Hint? Natasha was keenly aware of the flash of playfulness in his eyes. As a beautiful woman who often played with men in the palm of her hand, she knew very well what this look meant. Yes. Please wait a moment. Zhang Qing stretched out his left hand and took out a palm-sized Quinjet from his magic backpack. It was like a high-precision model and gently placed it on the table. What do you mean? Don't tell me you're suddenly addicted to this kind of children's toy. Nick Fury frowned subconsciously. Since the war in New York, whether it was the heroes of the Avengers or S.H.I.E.L.D.'s famous aircraft carrier and Quinjet, they have all become money-printing machines in the eyes of toy manufacturers, and the price is not cheap. The poor living below the poverty line absolutely cannot afford it. Toy? No, dear Mr. Chief, this is not a toy in my hand. It's a real Quinjet, but temporarily shrunk by magic. If you don't believe me, you can try to connect to the onboard electronic equipment on it. Zhang Qing explained meaningfully. Romanoff. Nick Fury directly winked at Black Widow next to him. The latter said nothing and directly opened the S.H.I.E.L.D. laptop she carried with her and completed the connection in just a few minutes. Instantly, the miniature Quinjet, which was originally motionless, immediately started its engine and slowly lifted off, circling the table twice. Dumbfounded, not to mention Steve Rogers, an old antique who had been frozen under the ice for decades, even the muscles on Braised Egg's face were twitching slightly. After a full minute, Nick Fury couldn't help but ask, "How did you do it? Have you met Dr. Hank Pym?" "No, I'm using a type of shrinking spell. Strictly speaking, it doesn't work on living creatures." Zhang Qing shook his head and stopped the man from making wild guesses. He didn't want to have anything to do with that Ant-Man, and he didn't want the director to have any bad associations. Magic? So, the guys who called themselves Hydra are hiding inside S.H.I.E.L.D.? Nick Fury was worthy of being an ace agent, and he instantly grasped the key point. Haha, that's just your guess. I didn't say anything. Zhang Qing curled his lips into a half-smile. He grabbed the quinjet and stuffed it into his pocket before continuing to drink his tea calmly. Damn it. Romanoff, you stay here and keep an eye on him. Steve, come back to the headquarters with us. There are some things I need to confirm immediately. Realizing the seriousness of the problem, the one-eyed director quickly made a judgment of the current situation. He turned around and walked out of the store with Captain America. He drove a black bulletproof car and disappeared at the end of the road. It wasn't until the two were far away that Zhang Qing put down the teacup in his hand and asked Black Widow sitting across from him, "Miss Natasha, if Nick Fury dies, would you work for me?" "Why do you say that?" Natasha Romanoff put her right leg on her lap and made a suggestive gesture. "Because more than half of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s members have pledged allegiance to Hydra, especially in the combat department. You can't find many people who are not Hydra. In addition, Alexander Pierce will not allow Nick Fury to interfere with his Insight plan that he has been planning for many years, so as long as our director returns to the headquarters, he will be assassinated in less than half an hour, and the murderer is likely to be the famous Captain America." While saying this, Zhang Qing always had a strange smile on his face, and his eyes flashed with golden light from time to time. "You are a participant." Black Widow was not a fool and immediately realized the terrible conspiracy behind it. She quietly took out her mobile phone and wanted to send a message to her boss. But before her fingers touched the screen, she found that her whole body seemed to be controlled by some mysterious force, and she couldn't even move a finger. "Participant? No, I'm not a participant, just a bystander who provided a little help. You can think of me as a curious sociologist who wants to see the practical results of Hydra's interesting theory. Of course, Nick Fury is not without a chance. At least I gave him a little hint. As long as he can find it in time, there is absolutely no problem for him to escape." After that, Zhang Qing stood up and crushed the communication equipment in Black Widow's hand. He also pulled out 2 guns, a tactical dagger, and a dozen interesting gadgets from her curvy body. After doing all this, he returned to his position and patiently waited for the news of Hydra's move. At the same time, the one-eyed director, who hurried back to Trident headquarters, said to Steve Rogers with a dignified expression, "Captain, I think we're in trouble. Here, take this and leave immediately. Remember, don't trust anyone, you're our only hope." "I don't understand. What happened?" Steve Rogers took the USB flash drive with a puzzled expression on his face. "There's no time to explain. Anyway, if things get out of hand, you go to the Dragon and make a deal with him. No matter what conditions he offers, agree to them first," Nick Fury said as he activated the only secret escape route in the office. But before he could push Captain America in, the office door was kicked open. Boom! Alexander Pierce led Brock Rum's tactical team and barged in. He teased in a slightly playful tone, "Dear Fury, where are you going?" "It's you? You are the Hydra leader lurking inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Although the one-eyed director found a lot of signs about the existence of Hydra, he never expected it to be his old boss who had promoted him. "Oh yes, it's me. But I'm not here today to talk about the old days, but to complete a great cause that Red Skull couldn't complete." Alexander Pierce raised the shining silver crystal in his hand and threw it at Captain America. The latter didn't understand what it was and subconsciously raised his shield in front of him. The next second, boom. Chapter 522. "Steve, what's the matter with you?" The one-eyed director glanced nervously at Captain America, who was kneeling on the ground and trembling all over, while carefully retreating, trying to use the simple furnishings in the office to avoid the deadly bullets that might be fired by the enemy. "Well, my head hurts," a lot of memory fragments suddenly emerged. Steve Rogers replied, gritting his teeth. He didn't know what was wrong with him. He felt as if he was experiencing an unprecedented revolution in his mind. All his previous perceptions of the world, beliefs, and values were quickly shattered and replaced by another unprecedented experience. He didn't know how long it took. It may be a few seconds, it may be 10 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime for him. When the man who had become a kind of spiritual symbol stood up again, he did not hesitate to raise his sandbag-sized fist and smashed it into Nick's face, knocking him to the ground. He then raised his right hand and shouted, "Long live Hydra!" Instantly, not only was Chief Braised Egg stunned, even the tactical team led by Brock Rumlow was stunned. They couldn't believe that the war hero who single-handedly destroyed Hydra in World War II would appear in front of them in such a completely opposite posture. Silence. Everyone present was scared silly by this sudden change. After a full minute, Alexander Pierce laughed and raised his right arm and responded, "Long live Hydra! Welcome to the team, dear Captain." "It's my pleasure." Steve Rogers knelt on one knee and made a medieval knight salute. "Ha ha ha ha. Great. It's intoxicating. Do you see, Fury? Do you think you can stop us now?" Alexander Pierce laughed wildly and recklessly. Although he didn't know what was wrapped in the crystal, Captain America's betrayal was definitely the greatest achievement since the establishment of Hydra. If this news was known to the other Hydra leaders in the world, they would be scared to crawl over and choose to surrender. At the thought of Hydra, which was fragmented after the fall of Nazi Germany, being integrated by himself again, Alexander Pierce had a sense of sacred mission to create a new chapter in history. "What should we do with this guy?" Steve Rogers kicked the one-eyed chief, who had fallen to the ground and hadn't recovered yet, and asked with a cold face. "Don't worry, he can't die now, at least not in his own office. Brock, let our super soldier deal with it. Try to act as realistic as possible. His death will open up a new world for us, a better world. Also, arrange a car for me. I want to personally thank the gentleman who has helped us so much." With the last word falling, Alexander Pierce left the director's office directly and drove to a small store near Washington, D.C., under the protection of 2 Hydra super soldiers. Just as he sat down and was about to say hello, Zhang Qing immediately put down the book in his hand, raised his head, and asked with a smile, "All done?" "Thanks to you, the whole process was extremely easy. In at most half an hour, the news of Nick Fury's murder will appear on the news media," Alexander Pierce replied in a relaxed tone. "The director of S.H.I.E.L.D. is dead. Captain America has defected. Is there anyone in the entire Western world who can stop him from implementing Project Insight?" In fact, from the moment Steve Rogers betrayed him, Nick Fury had lost his last trump card. Looking at the high-spirited old man, Zhang Qing couldn't help but smile and shake his head, and then said to Black Widow, "Well, Miss Natasha, did my predictions come true? Did you really defect?" Natasha Romanoff stared into Captain America's eyes and asked, "Defect? No, I have always been a spy planted by Hydra in the enemy." Steve Rogers gave his answer straightforwardly. "To be exact, it is the memory that has been replaced in the brain. As we all know, the so-called thinking of human beings is actually a kind of memory feedback. Generally speaking, when human beings are just born, they don't have much memory, so there is basically no self-consciousness in infancy until they come into contact with the world for a certain period of time, generally about 8 months to a year later. Self and subjective consciousness will be born. This also means that if the memory is replaced from beginning to end, a person's self will change and even be born with a completely opposite personality. When Zhang Qing was in the Faerun continent, he conducted cruel experiments on living people and found that modifying memory not only affects a person's self, but also permanently changes a person's soul. There is no doubt that Steve Rogers' current state is that his memory has been replaced. Unless another psionic warlock recovers it with his own power, he will never realize that he is not his original self. Of course, this recovery has a time limit. Once it exceeds 2 months, the brain will begin to delete the backup part, and it will be difficult to recover at that time. Alexander Pierce was in a good mood as he admired his former enemy's loyalty to Hydra. He leaned closer and asked in a low voice, "Can you tell me what's in your crystal?" Zhang Qing smiled and spread out his hands. It's nothing, just a carefully compiled memory. In addition, I have a small suggestion. I don't know if you'd like to hear it? Of course. Please go ahead. In fact, in my eyes, there is a fatal flaw in your plan. The so-called Insight Plan is essentially to complete a global strategic deterrent and eliminate Hydra's enemies through 3 fully armed aircraft carriers. But have you ever thought about it? Can a mere 3 aircraft carriers really do this? Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, the god of thunder of Asgard, they all have enough power to destroy the 3 aircraft carriers. How do you plan to end it then? Zhang Qing calmly expressed his views on the Insight Plan. He really didn't understand whether Hydra was tired of living or if their brains were short-circuited. They actually thought that by directly eliminating millions of people, they could regain control of the entire world. Not to mention the endless terrifying superpowers of the Marvel Universe, just the mushroom warheads of the nuclear powers alone could make the 3 aircraft carriers suffer. Chapter 523. You mean, the Avengers will become Hydra's enemy? Alexander Pierce asked uncertainly. Zhang Qing chuckled and replied, No, not just the Avengers. Believe me, if you really intend to clean the world according to the idiotic Zola algorithm, you will taste failure in a week at most. Ruling is a power game that tests patience and wisdom. You can't rely on oppression and fear to make all the ignorant people surrender. On the contrary, many people have the so-called reverse psychology. The more you suppress them, the stronger they will rebound. Smart rulers will guide public opinion, let the people believe in those that are beneficial to them, and reject those that threaten them. Remember the Mackenzie Doctrine that ran rampant in the U.S. in the 40s and 50s? That was a near-perfect operation. Not only did it suppress the domestic unrest, but it also resolved the hatred of the people for the government by abandoning a chess piece. Think about it, how could a mere senator from Wisconsin kidnap an entire country? The answer is simple, because he has the support of the real master behind the country. But what about Hydra? You always want to go to the front and achieve your goal of world domination in the most primitive, direct, and barbaric way. What a ridiculous strategy! I can't describe your stupidity and short-sightedness. Killing a large number of civilians will only create more hatred and enemies, but it won't bring any benefits at all. The real value of Project Insight is deterrence. It's like a nuclear weapon on a launcher, so no one dares to act rashly. My suggestion is to immediately delete the meaningless Zola algorithm and let it operate according to the plan of the World Security Council. But you can hide behind the scenes and selectively choose targets, such as the relatives and children of important government officials, or some billionaires who control the media, and force them to work for Hydra through threats and persuasion. When you control more than 70% of the world's government officials and media, it's the same as controlling the world. It doesn't matter if you go to the front or not. What was the most powerful thing about Hydra? It wasn't how advanced the technology was, how abundant the funds were, or how sophisticated the armed forces were. Their real strength was that they were good at hiding themselves. You never knew which official with great political achievements or a philanthropic billionaire was the leader of Hydra. These guys were like weeds on the side of the road. No matter how many times they were harvested, they would stubbornly grow back. However, such an organization actually wanted to walk onto the stage and stand under the sun to receive the fanatical cheers of the people. Unfortunately, even though Alexander Pierce hesitated for a moment, he eventually shook his head. I admit that what you said makes sense, but the entire Insight Plan involves too many details, and it's too late to modify it. I'm very sorry, but I have to follow the original plan. Don't worry, I've already developed countermeasures against the remaining Avengers. They can't stop the rise of Hydra. Well, I wish you all the best in advance. Goodbye. Zhang Qing realized that it was useless to say more, so he straightforwardly made a gesture of sending him off. As the saying goes, it's hard to persuade a damned ghost with good intentions. Since Hydra wants to die, He can't stop it. Goodbye. Alexander Pierce knew that the other party did not want to continue the discussion, so he decisively got up and left the store with his subordinate. After watching his car drive away, Zhang Qing released his control over Black Widow and said with a faint smile, "Dear Natasha, I've suddenly changed my mind. Do you want to save Nick Fury now?" "What do you mean?" "Nothing. I suddenly realized that Alexander Pierce's plan is impossible to succeed, so I decided to give up on him." "Give up?" Black Widow's eyes widened in surprise. She couldn't believe that the two people who looked intimate a few minutes ago had turned hostile in the blink of an eye. "Oh, is it difficult to understand? As I mentioned before, I'm a bystander, a social experimenter. I want to see what kind of interesting changes Hydra will bring when it comes to the stage. But according to the brutal slaughter of civilians in the Insight Plan, Hydra can't come to the stage at all, so I decided to terminate the experiment." Zhang Qing raised his head and drank the hot tea in the cup and explained casually. "So, in your eyes, this war that concerns the life and death of millions of people is just an interesting social experiment?" Natasha Romanoff asked with a serious expression. "Strictly speaking, that's right. Don't forget, I'm just a bystander. It's all an internal struggle. At best, I just gave some advice to one side. In addition, I just felt that Nick Fury was hit hard. If you want to save him, you'd better hurry up, or he'll die in 1 minute and 30 seconds. Zhang Qing raised his head and glanced at the electronic clock hanging on the wall. "Damn it! Quick, take me there." As soon as she heard that the director was in danger, Natasha Romanoff couldn't care about anything else. She immediately stood up and put on the weapons and gadgets on the table. Zhang Qing didn't say anything. He hugged the beautiful Black Widow's slender waist and raised his hand and snapped his fingers gently. Snap! Instantly, precise teleportation magic launched. The next second, the two appeared in a dimly lit underground parking lot. Before Natasha Romanoff could recover from the dizziness, she heard a loud bang in her ear. A man holding a grenade launcher pulled the trigger continuously at the SHIELD director's car. The deadly grenades hit the bulletproof car door that was strong enough to withstand an RPG rocket launcher and directly blew it into the sky. Accompanied by the dazzling red flames, Nick Fury was like a ragged rag doll. He was directly thrown out by the terrifying blast and slammed into a thick cement column, followed by blood spurting out of his mouth. Fury! Seeing that her boss life was hanging by a thread, Black Widow quickly pulled out 2 pistols and rushed forward while pulling the trigger. Boom! 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 Although the accuracy of the shooting while running was worrying, it still successfully attracted the enemy's attention. The masked man threw away the grenade launcher and hid behind a truck. Relying on the steel plate of the truck as a cover, he changed to a submachine gun and began to fire. Chapter 524. Yo, Mr. Director, you don't seem to be in a good condition right now? While the Black Widow was fighting with the enemy, Zhang Qing came to the one-eyed director and handed him a bottle of healing potion. Cough, cough, cough. Nick Fury kept spitting out blood foam from his mouth, mixed with pieces of flesh that looked like internal organs. After a full half a minute, he finally managed to catch his breath and asked in an extremely hoarse voice, "What is this? If I were you, I wouldn't ask anything and just drink it. After all, with your current injuries, if I wanted you to die, I wouldn't need to poison you at all. I could just sit by and watch patiently for a while." Zhang Qing hinted with a faint smile. He knew very well that the braised egg in front of him was obviously paranoid again and wanted to take the opportunity to get some useful information from him. But unfortunately, he wouldn't spoil him and he didn't intend to reveal any information. The reason was simple. Although he was using the body of a divine dragon, his soul and way of thinking were still that of a human. Once he communicated too much, he would inevitably reveal some habits that only people who lived on Earth for a long time would have. One had to know that a black dragon from an alternate world and a human from another Earth were worlds apart in terms of deterrence. *T. Okay, you're right. Feeling his broken ribs, spleen, and kidney, Nick Fury knew that he had no right to negotiate. He pulled out the cork and drank the potion. Instantly, an indescribable feeling quickly flowed through his body and repaired every damage in his body. In less than a few seconds, he felt the pain disappear and the bullet hole in his left lung also healed. If it weren't for the large amount of blood that had not dried up on his clothes, he would have thought that everything that just happened was an illusion. How is it? Isn't it magical? Zhang Qing pursed his lips and showed a playful expression. It is indeed magical, Mr. Dragon. Maybe after this incident we should sit down and have a good talk and make some deals. After saying that, Nick Fury struggled to get up and took out the pistol he carried with him to support his men in the bitter battle. Because it was none other than Captain America's best friend, the soul of the Roaring Commandos, Bucky Barnes, who was also injected with the super soldier serum after being caught by Hydra. In fact, the Winter Soldier was originally one of the trump cards in the hands of Alexander Pierce, but with the large amount of dragon blood that allowed new super soldiers to be born, his importance rapidly declined. Coupled with the long-term brainwashing, his emotions often fluctuated erratically, and he gradually became useless. Some people even suggested that Alexander Pierce destroy the Winter Soldier to prevent some old cases from being exposed. Looking at the three of them fighting back and forth for a long time, Zhang Qing finally couldn't help but yawn and suggest, "Everyone, can you please stop? In fact, you don't have to fight to the death like this, especially you, Bucky Baines. Maybe it's time for you to remember the past." Just as he finished speaking, a golden light flashed in his eyes, and his psionic ability was activated on the spot, awakening the memory in the deepest part of his brain. No! The Winter Soldier, who was still punching and kicking 1 second ago, screamed and fell to the ground in the next second, wailing in pain. Due to long-term brainwashing and freezing, the pain suffered by his central nervous system is beyond the limit of what humans can endure. Just as Natasha Romanoff raised her gun and wanted to thoroughly understand the enemy in front of her, Zhang Qing suddenly stopped her and said, "Don't kill him. If you don't want Steve Rogers to hate you for the rest of your life." "Captain? What the hell is going on?" Black Widow frowned subconsciously. "It's very simple. The person who wants to kill you is actually a friend of Captain America, Bucky Barnes. He was brainwashed by Hydra and doesn't know what he's doing. In addition, Steve Rogers is in a similar state." Zhang Qing gave an explanation, avoiding the main point and dwelling on the trivial. "He is not a fool, and he will not let the two people in front of him know that Captain America's betrayal is actually because of him. Anyway, it's impossible for the other party to confront Alexander Pierce, so he simply put all the blame on Hydra. There's no other way, who told these guys to be useless and look for their own death." Nick Fury smelled a conspiracy and stared with one eye and said, "Can you help us? I've helped you awaken his memory. As for the rest, it's up to you to solve it yourself. I believe that with the help of the Winter Soldier, you will be able to stop Alexander Pierce from launching Project Insight. If it still doesn't work, you can call me. Let me remind you in advance that my fee is very high." After that, Zhang Qing smiled slightly, and his whole person gradually became transparent and finally disappeared completely. Natasha Romanoff looked around vigilantly until she was sure that the biggest uncertainty had really left. Then she walked quickly to the one-eyed chief and reported in a low voice, "Fury, just a few minutes ago, Alexander Pierce met with that guy in person and even talked a lot about Project Insight." "About what?" Nick Fury spat out the remaining blood in his mouth, and his face looked a little gloomy. "About the plan to let Hydra continue to hide behind and secretly develop forces until it completely controls the whole world. He turned the war involving millions of lives into a social experiment on the spot. At this point, Black Widow's voice suddenly became sharp, and her eyes showed undisguised anger. Did Alexander Pierce agree? Nick Fury continued. Did he agree? No. I think it may be for this reason that he stopped cooperating with Hydra. Natasha Romanoff quickly shook her head and replied. Really, it seems that we still have some luck, don't we? If he really stands on the side of Hydra, I can't guarantee that we can finally turn the tables. Before Nick Fury could finish his words, Bucky Baines, who was lying on the ground, suddenly twitched and jumped up. His face was full of confusion. Where is this? Steve. Where's Steve? Calm down. Do you remember what happened just now? Black Widow carefully kept a safe distance. She would not forget the strong fighting power that the other party showed in just a few minutes, and she didn't want to fight again at all. Well, sorry, I don't remember. I only remember that I fell from the train, and I don't remember the rest. Bucky Barnes squatted down with his head in his hands. Chapter 525. As Nick Fury, Black Widow, and Winter Soldier disappeared from Hydra's sight at the same time, Alexander Pierce quickly realized the seriousness of the problem and quickly accelerated the steps of Project Insight. He even played the traitorous Captain America card to convince the World Security Council that they needed Project Insight to deal with an increasingly dangerous and chaotic situation. In just 2 or 3 days, he got the final authorization and placed all the more than 100 super soldiers he had created in the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters in order to deal with possible sudden attack. At the same time, Nick Fury was also hiding in the dark and calling for friends. Hawkeye, Iron Man, War Machine have joined in, plus Winter Soldier and Black Widow, who got rid of the brainwashing. The lineup is also unprecedentedly strong. After all, the current situation is more complicated, and because of Zhang Cheng's intervention, it is much more dangerous than the original plot, and the one-eyed director did not dare to be careless. In particular, hundreds of super soldiers made with the blood of the divine dragon, once they are hidden among ordinary people, their destructive power is simply indescribable. In this way, after some intensive preparation, the two sides finally collided in the last half an hour before the flying aircraft carrier was about to take off. Boom! 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 A red figure crossed the sky and directly destroyed 3 Quinjets that had just taken off and were about to launch intercepting missiles. There is no need to ask, this is not someone else at all, it is Iron Man, who always likes to make high-profile appearances, Tony Stark. The silver-gray figure behind him is naturally his friend, War Machine James Rhodes. With the help of unparalleled mobility and intelligent assistance systems, they easily smashed S.H.I.E.L.D.'s prevention and control system, and they also invaded the internal network and transmitted the pre-recorded video data of Nick Fury to every monitor. In less than 10 minutes, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s internal members clearly knew that they had been infiltrated by Hydra, and even Captain America had been brainwashed and turned into a terrible killer. For a while, many agents who were still loyal to S.H.I.E.L.D. picked up their weapons and began to resist Hydra's control, and various gunshots and explosions were heard. Looking at the chaotic scene outside, Alexander Pierce finally roared angrily, "Send out our most elite soldiers! All of them! Make sure that the flying aircraft carrier can take off smoothly." Understood. Brock Rum nodded vigorously and quickly issued an order into the microphone. In the blink of an eye, a group of heavily armed soldiers in black uniforms rushed out of the hidden corner and launched a 3-dimensional coverage attack against Iron Man and War Machine flying around in midair. Even with the help of the AI system, the two of them managed to avoid most of the anti-air missiles. However, in the end, they still took a few hits and fell heavily to the ground, creating 2 large craters. F***CK. Tony, you didn't tell me these guys had anti-aircraft missiles. James Rhodes cursed as he got up from the ground. Stop complaining. They're coming. Tony Stark raised his right hand and fired a shockwave at one of the charging super soldiers. Bang! After a loud bang, the young warrior was not sent flying. He only took 2 steps back, and then pounced on him and knocked him to the ground. "Damn it, Jarvis. Tell me what just happened," Iron Man asked his AI butler and combat assistant while trying to break free from the other party's entanglement. "Sir, according to the scan, the enemy in front of you has 20 times the strength and physique of a normal human. It is with such a superhuman body that he resisted the shockwave you fired. In addition, there are at least 107 identical super soldiers around." Jarvis gave the answer in emotionless words. "What? There are more than 100 of these guys?" Tony Stark opened his mouth in surprise. After a short fight, no one knows better than him how terrible these guys are, whether it is strength, speed, or resilience. If it weren't for the protection of the Iron Man armor, he wouldn't have been able to hold on for even a second. "Tony, let me tell you some bad news. More than 100 super soldiers are rushing towards us." James Rhodes jumped up, kicked the enemy holding his friend's thigh, and quickly climbed high into the sky. "Nick Fury, I need an explanation. You didn't tell me that Hydra had more than 100 Steve Rogers in their hands." Iron Man also fled to the sky and questioned the one-eyed chief through the radio. However, the cunning braised egg did not answer his question directly, but comforted him softly. "Relax, I have sent someone to ask for reinforcements. You just have to hold them back." Before Tony Stark could continue to ask, Nick Fury directly told the other two men. "Romanoff, Clint. Do it." "Roger." "Understood." Black Widow and Hawkeye, who had already secretly lurked in the building, passed through the corridor one after another, and knocked down several Hydra agents at the door of the office at a very fast speed, and directly broke in. "You guys have finally shown up. Steve, kill them." Alexander Pierce was not flustered by the appearance of the two at all and directly gave Captain America an order. "Long live Hydra." Steve Rogers did not waste any time. He shouted a slogan, raised his shield, and rushed forward. No one noticed that outside the building, Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes had quietly sneaked into the interior of one of the flying aircraft carriers. At the same time, in an inconspicuous small restaurant on the side of the road in Washington, D.C., Zhang Qing was tasting the delicious steaming barbecue and learning about the latest battle between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra through the news broadcast on TV. It has to be said that the Western reporter's sense of smell and speed are definitely more efficient than any intelligence organization. From the outbreak of the war to the present, it has been less than 5 minutes and the scene has been transmitted to the world. Even the CIA, the FBI, and the military under the U.S. government have not had time to respond. Just after he swallowed a piece of delicious and juicy beef, several familiar figures suddenly appeared, and the middle-aged man in the lead did not say anything and directly sat across the table. These guys are none other than Coulson and his team members who have disappeared for a while. Of course, due to the influence of the Hydra Rebellion, everyone's face showed more or less exhaustion. Chapter 526. Here. Take a look. This is the killing machine made by Hydra with your blood. Coulson took out his mobile phone, opened one of the video files, and placed it on the table. As for the content, it is nothing more than some bloody and cruel injection scenes, and some strength, physical fitness, and combat tests. Obviously, Hydra has mastered the critical point of divinity and understands how much dragon blood to inject without causing the experimental body to lose control. Of course, due to the reduction of divinity, these later mass-produced super soldiers are far less powerful than the first few, but they are enough as an establishment. You came all the way here just to show me this? Zhang Qing licked the sauce from the corner of his mouth, and a smile appeared on his face. No, I just want you to understand that it is not a wise choice to make a deal with Hydra. Seeing no trace of guilt or regret in the other party's eyes, Coulson immediately realized that his strategy had failed and decisively ended the topic. In fact, he had intended to try to use emotions such as sympathy and guilt to achieve his goal. But unfortunately, Zhang Qing, who has completely embraced the darkness, has long abandoned the weak parts of most human nature. Even if the whole earth explodes and human civilization perishes, he will not shed even a tear for it. Don't worry, I won't make any more deals with Hydra in the future, because through this incident I found that they can only hide in the dark sewers like cockroaches and rats, and they don't deserve to own and dominate the whole world. Zhang Qing did not hide his contempt for Hydra in his words. Although in the eyes of many people, Hydra is a huge, dangerous, and evil supervillain enough to threaten the safety of the Earth. But in his eyes, most of the Hydra leaders had too low a vision. They had no ambition and dominance to dominate the world. They were only satisfied with eating the leftovers of Wall Street bankers and occasionally causing a little trouble. That's all. They had no long-term and thorough plan at all. They wasted the resources they had at hand. Oh? If Hydra heard your evaluation, they would be very sad. In addition, the director asked me to entrust you with a task, to get rid of all these super soldiers. It shouldn't be a difficult task for you. After that, Carlson sent a list of names to Zhang Cheng's mobile phone through the wireless network. The latter glanced at it and quickly raised his head and asked, "What about the reward? Don't tell me that Mr. Director wants me to work for free." "This is your reward." Carlson quickly opened the password-locked box in his hand. In an instant, 2 sealed tubes appeared in front of him. One of them contained dark blue translucent particles, while the other contained a small piece of the famous vibranium. There was no doubt that the one-eyed chief knew that Zhang Qing had been collecting all kinds of strange elements, so he specially allowed him to use 2 elements that he had never seen before as bargaining chips. Without any hesitation, Zhang Qing directly crushed the bulletproof glass that was strong enough to withstand large-caliber bullet. He held the 2 elements in his palm, closed his eyes and used the alchemy stone to feel the internal result. After a full 5 minutes, he slowly opened his eyes and said to Carlson with a smile, "The deal is done. Give me 30 seconds. 30 seconds? Our plane." Before Carlson could finish his words, he saw Zhang Qing disappear into thin air, leaving only a table full of unfinished barbecued meat. "Feizi, did you see that? What happened just now?" Melinda immediately asked the team's technical support through the radio. It should be some kind of teleportation magic. Sorry, this does not belong to the scope of science. I can't give an accurate answer for the time being." "Damn it. Quick, everyone get back on the plane. Let's go to the headquarters." At the same time, in the middle of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Trident, the 3 flying aircraft carriers had left the base and began to take off according to the scheduled procedure. Despite the addition of Iron Man and War Machine, Hydra had to turn on the weapon system in advance to counterattack, but they failed to shoot down any of them. Just when everyone was at a loss, Zhang Qing stepped directly through the portal and appeared in the center of the chaotic battlefield. He winked at the Hydra super soldiers, and the latter collectively knelt on the ground and screamed in pain. In just a few minutes, black scales, claws, and wings grew on their bodies, and their heads turned into dragon heads. My God! Who the hell can tell me what the hell is going on? Is this a real-life version of Aliens? Tony Stark's eyes widened in surprise. Leave them alone. Go and solve the flying aircraft carriers. Once they start connecting with the satellite, millions of people will die. Nick Fury reminded loudly. Although he didn't know what happened to these Hydra super soldiers, from the appearance, it was obviously related to the Black Dragon, so he didn't need to pay attention to them for the time being. These Dragonians who had just completed their transformation ignored the orders issued by Hydra and stepped in front of their master, one by one, kneeling on one knee to show their attitude. Dragon blood. The most incredible bloodline. Just a little bit of it can give ordinary people great power. But at the same time, it will also make humans slaves of the dragon. There was no resistance. Except for the first few experimental bodies made with Tampa's fingers, the rest of the super soldiers all crawled at the feet of the dragon. Even if there were bullets flying around them, they didn't move at all. This was a heart-wrenching scene, not to mention Alexander Pierce. Even Nick Fury couldn't help but feel cold all over. Similarly, the One-Eyed Chief was secretly glad that he didn't start S.H.I.E.L.'s super soldier program, otherwise the consequences would have been unimaginable. "Get up, my servants." Zhang Qing casually walked through the Dragonians. Just as he was thinking about what to do with these newly awakened subordinates, the voice of Braised Egg suddenly came from the phone in his pocket. "You owe me an explanation." "What explanation?" Zhang Qing raised the corner of his mouth and showed a playful expression. "Don't play dumb. What's with those half-dragon, half-human super soldiers? Why can you control them?" Nick Fury asked in a harsh tone. "It's nothing. My blood flows in their bodies, so naturally they will obey my orders. Even if I tell them to die, they will not hesitate. This comes from the dragon's absolute control over his own bloodline. But don't worry, they won't lose their minds or become another person," Zhang Qing explained casually. Chapter 527. You took advantage of Hydra. You took advantage of Alexander Pierce? As a typical conspiracy theorist, Nick Fury has always been accustomed to speculating everyone's thoughts from the darkest point of view. In particular, the other party is a black dragon of unknown origin, which holds mysterious supernatural powers that cannot be inferred by common sense. Take advantage? No, 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 don't forget, they came to me on their own initiative, not the other way around. You know, the humans in this world have a terrible misconception of thinking, that is, arrogance. They always think that they are the spirit of all things, the most outstanding species on Earth and the supreme ruler, who can control everything. But in fact, they can't control anything, and they like to study dangerous items that they don't understand at all, which eventually leads to terrible disasters. Zhang Qing didn't give the One-Eyed Chief any face and mercilessly satirized the other party. Strictly speaking, whether it was the birth of Hulk and Abomination, or the invasion of New York by the alien fleet caused by the research of the Magic Cube, the doubts that happened in the near future, Iron Man used the Mind Stone to create Ultron to destroy the world, all of these were the result of the people of the Marvel Universe looking for trouble. It must be known that under normal circumstances, it is impossible for a superpower to make such low-level stupid mistakes over and over again. Unless the politicians' heads are full of shit, as long as there is a loss of control for the first time, they will never allow a similar situation to happen a second time. But what's interesting is that the Marvel Universe is so different. Countless people just don't learn from their mistakes. Even if their predecessors are sent to prison one by one, they will continue to cause more damage and casualties in the name of protecting mankind and protecting the Earth. Nick Fury apparently understood the irony in Zhang Qing's words, and he probed in a gloomy tone. "First you cooperated with Hydra, and then you betrayed them. What is your purpose?" "Oh, whether you want to believe it or not, I have no intention of doing anything to this world. Everything I did before was just to pass the time. Well, let's call it a day. I need to set aside some time to talk to Alexander Pierce alone." With that, Zhang Qing directly crushed the mobile phone that S.H.I.E.L.D. gave him with the backdoor monitoring program and took hundreds of Dragonborn descendants through the war-torn S.H.I.E.L.D. building to a messy office. The reason why it was a mess was because of the scuffle between Captain America, Hawkeye, and Black Widow. Obviously, because the latter two were restricted by the fact that they didn't dare to kill Hawkeye, they were no match for Hawkeye. In addition, Hawkeye's vibranium shield could block almost all of the arrows. Hawkeye's room to fight was extremely limited. At the moment, it could only be said that they were fighting to a draw. Without a doubt, Zhang Qing's appearance caused everyone to subconsciously stop fighting. This was especially so for Alexander Pierce, who was hiding in the corner. His pupils suddenly contracted, revealing undisguised panic and fear. No one knew better than him how terrifying this seemingly harmless young man was. Mind reading. Create memories. Rewriting a person's character. Even the person who had been rewritten would not be able to detect it. Just a little bit of blood could create a super soldier as powerful as Captain America. Feeling the awe and fear in the air, Zhang Qing politely put one hand on his chest and bowed slightly. "Good day, I hope my arrival didn't disturb you." Why did you suddenly stand on the side of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Alexander Pierce asked with some reluctance. He couldn't understand why the other party had changed his position in just a few days. "You seem to have a deep misunderstanding of me. In fact, I never stood on any side. I just wanted to observe the changes in the whole world from the perspective of a bystander, especially Hydra's interesting political ideas. But unfortunately, what you did was so disappointing that I had to abandon you and choose S.H.I.E.L.D. as the trading partner." Zhang Qing answered as he walked up to Alexander Pierce, raised his finger and tapped him gently on the head. Instantly, the highest leader of Hydra hidden inside S.H.I.E.L.D. seemed to have been possessed as he directly smashed the glass and jumped out of the window, falling into a pool of flesh and blood in a free fall. His sudden and heroic death stunned Black Widow and Hawkeye, not to mention the agents who had joined Hydra. But it didn't take long for everyone who saw this scene to feel a chill in their hearts. Death is not terrible. What is terrible is the ability to quietly manipulate a person's will. Just as the atmosphere became a little depressed and tense, Iron Man Tony Stark's voice suddenly crossed a beautiful parabola in the sky and crashed into the place where Alexander Pierce had just jumped. His face was covered in dust and he ignored the damage to his suit and shouted at the top of his voice, "OSH*T. The plan failed. There's a chip that didn't fit. You'd better think of something quickly, or the aircraft carrier will attack in 40 seconds. "What? Damn it. Didn't you promise that there would be no accidents?" As soon as they heard that the aircraft carrier's weapon system would begin to wipe out the ground in 40 seconds, the abuse in the communication channel was endless. Anyone who knows anything about the 3 aircraft carriers knows that once that thing is launched, it will immediately cause the deaths of thousands of civilians. Not to mention S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers, even the U.S. government can't afford such a big scapegoat. After all, the invasion of an alien fleet is one thing, and human killing each other is another thing. Looking at the countless black barrels in the sky, a Quinjet finally stopped at the window of Alexander Pierce's office, and Nick Fury, wearing a black trench coat, came down from it. He ignored Captain America, whose eyes were full of hatred, and went directly to Zhang Qing and said straightforwardly, "I need your help. My price is not low." Zhang Qing pursed his lips and showed a smile. "Don't worry, I will give you a satisfactory reward." The one-eyed chief knew that he had to bleed a lot this time, but the situation was really urgent and he could only agree without hesitation. "The deal is set. Leave the rest to me." As the last word blurted out, Zhang Qing raised his hands, locked the 3 aircraft carriers, and began to chant the ancient dragon language loudly. In just 10 seconds, the aircraft carrier began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye, and even the Quinjets on the deck were no exception, but the operators on the deck were not included. Chapter 528. Getting smaller and smaller, getting smaller and smaller. In the end, the 3 huge flying aircraft carriers became only about tens of centimeters in size, and they were pulled down from a high altitude by the power of the psionic arcana, and finally fell into Zhang Qing's hands. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Tony Stark would never have believed that this exquisite model-like gadget was a war machine that almost caused great destruction to the whole world. It took a full minute for him to recover from the shock, and he asked in a hurry, "Who are you? What kind of cutting-edge technology did you use to shrink the scale of an object to 1% of its original size?" "Technology? No, I don't know anything about technology. I use magic, a mysterious energy that exists widely in the multiverse," Zhang Qing explained casually. While talking, he directly used the power of the psionic arcana to go deep into Iron Man's brain and directly copied all the knowledge in his mind. The combination of psionic arcana plus magic crystal fragments plus mind flayer's brain cells is enough for him to copy a genius lifetime knowledge in just a few seconds and store it in the long-term memory area. Although he can't use it freely, he can call it when needed, just like looking up information in a library. Magic? Are you trying to make me laugh? Tony Stark has always been a firm scientist, and naturally, he doesn't believe in such a mysterious thing as magic, and he showed a disdainful expression. Just because you don't know and don't understand doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Remember, there are countless things in the world that you can't understand, and staying humble is the shortcut to the supreme truth. After saying this meaningful sentence, Zhang Qing directly stuffed the 3 flying aircraft carriers into his pocket, intending to take them back to Magic Earth and put them in his home as decorations, completely ignoring the ugly face of Braised Egg. After all, this thing is much cooler than a toy model in the ordinary sense. The cost of one alone is tens of billions of dollars, and it can be pulled out and used at a critical moment. Wait. Seeing that Zhang Qing was about to turn and leave, Nick Fury finally couldn't help but stand up and say, "Hand over the flying aircraft carrier. It belongs to S.H.I.E.L.D., not your toy." Ha 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 ha. S.H.I.E.L.D.? Dear Mr. Director, do you think it is possible for S.H.I.E.L.D. to exist after the Hydra Rebellion? Even if they survived, it would be impossible for them to reach their previous scale and influence. As for these 3 flying aircraft carriers, they were originally spoils of war. I snatched them from Hydra. What qualifications do you have to order me to return them to you? Zhang Qing asked with a laugh. Even though he didn't really like these flying aircraft carriers with exaggerated designs and limited practical uses, he wouldn't hand them over just because of a few words from the other party. What do you want? The one-eyed director didn't get angry because of the rejection, but calmly continued to probe. He understood that the extremely dangerous person in front of him was not the kind of person who could be threatened to achieve his goal. To be precise, the existing weapons on Earth, even nuclear warheads, could not pose a real threat to it. Not to mention the 100-meter-long body, just the ability to invade one's brain and control one's thoughts, as well as teleportation, were enough to give one a headache. Not to mention the ability to use blood to create Draconid descendant. It's simple. Deal. If you want to get something, you have to pay the corresponding price. As long as you can afford the price, I don't mind returning them to you. In addition, I believe you should understand that the price I am referring to is not something like US dollars, gold, gems, etc., but something that is really valuable in my eyes. Zhang Qing straightforwardly offered his own conditions. Anyway, for him, it would be best to get something useful from the shield that is about to disintegrate. It doesn't matter if he can't get it, he can take it back as an ornament. A deal? Okay, I understand. Last question, but what are you going to do with these half-dragon and half-human guys? After solving the problem of the ownership of the flying aircraft carrier, Nick Fury turned his attention to more than 100 Draconids. You know, he has seen the terrible destructive power of these super soldiers with his own eyes. The thought of having such an armed force not under the control of himself or any national government makes him feel restless. Zhang Qing apparently knew the one-eyed director's thoughts and asked with a smile, "What do you think should be done? Are you going to let them work for S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Avengers?" "Can't I?" Braised Egg narrowed his eyes and glanced at the Draconids who stood motionless in place. "Do you remember what I just told you? The Draconids are an extension of the dragon bloodline, so I am the supreme master to them. Are you sure it is a wise choice to let such a group of guys become your subordinates?" "No, I'm not sure. But I think it's more dangerous to let them follow you. How about this, let's make a deal. You give these Draconids an order to make them loyal to the Avengers, and I'll give them a small gift in private as compensation. How about that?" There is no doubt that Nick Fury wants to monitor Zhang Qing by monitoring these Draconids, and by the way, make use of these Draconids' powerful combat power. Okay. But the premise is that your little gift can't disappoint me too much, otherwise, your Draconid Legion will rebel. As soon as his voice fell, Zhang Qing turned directly and ordered the hundreds of Draconids loudly, "Return to human form. From now on, you must be loyal to the Avengers." "Yes, Great Master. Your will is our command." With deafening shouts, the Draconids knelt on the ground and slowly returned to their human form. "God! These guys are as scary as fanatics." Hawkeye's mouth twitched as he exclaimed. But while he was in a daze, Steve Rogers immediately picked up his shield and slammed into the Black Widow, who was close to him. He ran out of Alexander Pierce's office in the blink of an eye. "Damn it! Catch the captain! Don't let him run away!" The one-eyed chief reminded loudly. "Leave it to me. This old guy can't run far." Tony Stark, who had been having a hard time with Captain America, immediately activated his Iron Man armor and chased after him, constantly firing shockwaves. The S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, which was already riddled with holes, suddenly became worse. It was estimated that it would collapse before the U.S. military could take over. Listening to the commotion outside, Nick Fury took a deep breath and said, "I need you to get Steve back to normal. Can you do that?" Chapter 529. Time flew by and half a month passed in a flash. After a big battle between S.H.I.E.L.D. and the parasitic Hydra inside it, the whole world fell into chaos. Although Alexander Pierce's Insight plan eventually failed, the bad effects it caused continued to ferment. Whether it was the U.S. military or the World Security Council, which had been severely tricked, they did not intend to let S.H.I.E.L.D., a huge intelligence organization infiltrated by the enemy, continue to exist, and they began to take over their strongholds and resources scattered around the world. At the same time, the remaining Hydra members were not idle. Some continued to stir up trouble for the agents loyal to S.H.I.E.L.D., and some quickly contacted other Hydra leaders, lurking in the dark to prepare for the next action. Of course, the most important thing is Captain America, who is regarded as a hero and a spiritual symbol by the entire Western world. Now it should be called Hydra. Captain Steve Rogers escaped from under the eyes of Nick Fury and many Avengers. At present, the U.S. government is furious about this matter, and the condemnation of the one-eyed director is even higher than the previous one. Some radical guys even think that he should be sent to a military court to be shot. Unfortunately, this kind of threat could only stay in words at most. Nick Fury has been in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. for too long enough to have a lot of evidence on hand of politicians and bureaucrats breaking the law. Although the slogans are loud, there are few who really dare to put it into action. In the end, they can only turn big things into small things and small things into nothing. They secretly track down Steve Rogers and strive to catch Captain America as soon as possible and restore him to normal. As one of the driving forces behind this series of disasters, Zhang Qing has long disappeared from the public sight with the new S.H.I.E.L.D. director, Coulson. The only thing the outside world knows is that more than 100 super soldiers who can freely switch between human and dragonoid forms have been incorporated by the Avengers. In S.H.I.E.L.D.'s new secret base, several agents are methodically tracking the whereabouts of Hydra members and restoring part of the intelligence network system. However, among the many busy figures, there was an idle person sitting on the sofa, flipping through profound physics books while transforming the teacup in his hand into all kinds of simple or complex substances. The speed at which he did it was simply unbelievable. Obviously, he is none other than Zhang Qing himself. After months of constant exercise and exposure to new elements, his alchemy level has advanced by leaps and bounds, surpassing miles. Coupled with the knowledge absorbed from the world of Azeroth and the Faerun continent, no matter what element it is, as long as its internal structure is understood, it can be transformed through alchemy stones. Even the so-called first metal in the Marvel Universe, vibranium, is no exception. The only drawback is that the more complex the element structure, the more magic energy is required during the transformation process. It seems that it's time to find some time. Zhang Qing closed the book in his hand, squinted, and muttered to himself. After all, the alchemy stone represented an alchemist's understanding of the relationship between matter and energy. It also represented the worldview in one's heart. Every alchemist's understanding of the alchemist, alchemist's ants, alchemy, alchemy, alchemist. Although it wasn't that he couldn't use other people's alchemy stones, it wasn't as convenient as using his own alchemy stones. Hey! What are you mumbling about? Sky, who is wearing a black tactical vest, ran in from outside and sat on the opposite side of the sofa. Since she was able to master the most basic psychic ability, she applied to become a field agent. With her strange ability, she solved many troublesome enemies for the team. No, nothing. Zhang Qing quickly shook his head, put the cup back to its original state, and put it back on the table. Oh right, how's your mission? Do you often go to the basement to catch up with your ex-boyfriend? Don't mention it. I don't know what's wrong with Coulson recently. He's always hiding in his room alone. He doesn't see anyone except May. As for Ward, I don't want to talk about him now. After saying that, the vibranium who has yet to awaken tore open a bag of potato chips and stuffed them into her mouth without any ladylike image. It was obvious that the Hydra rebellion had a great impact on her. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a turning point in her life. In addition, as her telepathy became stronger and stronger, she began to be able to read the shallow thoughts of a specific target within a certain range. With this, she was able to predict the enemy's attack method in advance several times. Oh well, it seems that you haven't been very happy recently. But I still want to remind you that the psychic ability comes from the deepest self-affirmation in the heart. Please remember this. No matter what happens in the future, never doubt the choices you make. Only in this way will you become stronger and stronger. In addition, I'll inform you that I'll be leaving around the 4th of next month. If you have any questions, you'd better ask them early. After saying this, Zhang Qing ignored the other's shocked reaction. He stood up and returned to his room, slamming the door shut. *T. After a full minute, Sky came back to her senses and immediately stood up and rushed into the director's office of the secret base. She shouted at Coulson and May, "Not good. I have bad news for you. Mr. Dragon said he's leaving around the 4th of next month." "What? What do you mean by leaving?" "He's leaving this world, or is he leaving us?" Coulson asked loudly with a nervous face. Sorry, I'm not sure. It should be the former. You'd better ask him yourself." Sky scratched her head awkwardly. "Damn it. I hate this state where everything is out of control." Coulson complained in a low voice, and then turned to his old partner. "Help me ask what's going on. If it's the former, that's the best. But if it's the latter, make sure he doesn't leave our surveillance range." "No problem. I'll go with you." As soon as the two women stepped out of the office, Coulson dialed a secret contact number hidden behind the wall. About 10 seconds later, Nick Fury's voice came from the other side of the phone. "What happened?" "The dragon said he's leaving." "Leaving? Leaving our world?" "I'm not sure yet, but I think it should be." "What are you going to do?" "Confirm it first. If it's true, then activate Plan B and maximize the benefits as much as possible. I believe you know very well how precious the power he has is to us, whether it's those strange supernatural powers or the dragon's blood that can create super soldiers." "Got it."